reappeared again a little bit further down towards the east. This happened about 4 times. It made a stuttering motion, like it was the engine was cranking up, and it was making 4 times a stuttering, appearing, and reappearing motion. And all of a sudden, it disappeared again. It reappeared quite a bit further, and it just shot off due east with incredible speed. And there was no acceleration. It was just instant speed.
Christiaan, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I will let you introduce yourself and say your full name because I don't want to butcher the shit out of it. Because I know I will.
I don't blame you. I'm Christiaan Van Heijst. I'm a Dutch airline pilot. I'm now 39 years old. I've been flying for 20 years now. Started general aviation, built my way up to bigger and nicer airplanes. And parallel to flying, I've been carrying a camera with me and basically trying to document all the beautiful things that I've been seeing from the cockpit all the time. And this basically grew into a parallel career that I'm enjoying right now. So I'm a Flying Dutchman with a camera in his hand.
Are you based out of the Netherlands? Are you based in Amsterdam?
Well, I used to be flying for a Dutch company, but right now I'm flying for a Belgian company, which is about 2 hours drive from where I live. So it's relatively close by, but everything in Europe is relatively close by.
Yeah, so I was actually going to say I lived in Maastricht in the Netherlands for about 5 weeks a couple years ago because my girlfriend was going to school there. She was finishing her degree. And so I actually had a chance to, zoom around the Netherlands for a little bit. But we were based in Maastricht and it was beautiful. Like, I had a great time just working there, exploring. Beautiful country.
Nice,
very flat.
Nice.
Very flat.
Very flat. Actually, with the exception of Maastricht, because that's in the most southern tip of the Netherlands, which is already kind of hilly, and it's a beautiful city as well. Nice to hear.
Yeah, the hills in the Netherlands though are like, it feels like you're still walking flat. Like people told me that, like, oh, this is actually the hilliest part of the Netherlands, or one of the most. And I'm like, really? And you just look out and you see hills that like barely go up and down. And there are some decent hikes around there, but it was a good time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I guess that's also the reason why the Netherlands has so many bikes here, because if we get on the bike, you don't have to climb up all the hills all the time. So I guess that's the reason for it.
Yeah, it's something I noticed is that in the Netherlands, the bike lanes are massive compared to New York. If you're biking in New York, you essentially get a sliver on the side of the road with cars and taxis zooming by that don't give a shit about you, and you're It's like this crazy merging of bikes and cars all the time, and the bikes don't really follow the laws, but like the cars also are just skip the stop signs, and like it just becomes like this whole mishmash. And then when I went to Maastricht, I was just amazed at how much the drivers respected the bikers and the bikers respected drivers, and people respected traffic laws in general. Like I would be waiting at a stoplight at 6:30 in the morning, just crossing the street. Like it's red, but I'm crossing the street anyway because no one's coming. But like people will actually wait for it to turn in an empty street to cross the street. And like I was just amazed at the cleanliness and the organization of the traffic there.
Yeah, in general, it's kind of organized and a high level of discipline. But if you go to a city like Amsterdam, then I guess it's the opposite. Yeah,
yeah. Amsterdam was the opposite. Maastricht was, I felt like I was an outcast crossing the street if the light wasn't, that white man on the sign telling you to cross.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess that's typical for the Dutch attitude. Everything is organized, everything is arranged. Basically, the whole country is landscaped from a swamp, so they had to organize everything. And I think this molded the mentality of the Dutch people.
Yeah. What if we just spoke for the next 3 hours about Dutch traffic and the landscape of? I just tricked you into doing like a city planning podcast on the Netherlands for 3 hours.
It's
very exciting.
Probably one of the topics I have absolutely no knowledge about, but we can see we can fill 3 hours.
Yeah, exactly. I think we'd run out after about, or I'd run out within the next minute or so. But I wanted to actually start with an excerpt from one of your blog posts, and the name of the post is escaping me, but it was about flying over the Pacific. You had written about the vastness of doing a Pacific flyover, and I wanted to read something from that and just get your thoughts on it. So, and people can go check out the full articles on your website as well. Very, very interesting blog, and you obviously have all the photos that we're gonna get into with the unidentified versus explainable phenomenon. And so I'm gonna link your website wherever people are listening to or watching this, so you can definitely go check it out.
Cool.
And yeah, so you write, I often look down and gaze at the dark blue surface. The same body of water without apparent change for over 10 hours straight. 10,000 kilometers of absolutely nothing but an alien abyss. I catch myself checking the engine instruments and rerunning my fuel calculations more often than needed. This is not a region where I want to put my life vest to the test. Far above, another type of immeasurable death is laid out. Immeasurable depth, excuse me. A possibly infinite void filled with trillions of ancient stars, galaxies, and worlds. And I'm reading this and I'm like trying to picture what that must feel like to be a pilot, having that view with the open window in front of you, getting to just stare up or down at that for thousands of hours. Cause I'm just used to, you pull down the window, maybe it's like half open, but the cabin is lit up, so you can't really see that well anyway. Sometimes you can, but like in those moments where you have that unobstructed view of the abyss below, the heavens above you, where does your mind go? Like, what do you think about? Like, because to me, that's just mind blowing to have that view constantly.
Yeah, also from the cockpit, we have the benefit of having these really big windows basically all around us. So the view we have is much better compared to what you can see as a passenger from the little cabin window. In general, of course, if you have a flight of 10 hours, it's not that I'm staring out of the window for 10 hours straight. I sometimes, I just look out of the window for an hour and then do some administration or do some other paperwork, etc. But those moments, especially if you fly with a colleague who's appreciating those kind of views as well, are really amazing. And often I dim all the cockpit lights to a minimum, and then especially at night, if there's no moon, you can see so many stars. It's just unbelievable. The vastness of the night sky, especially if there's no light pollution, it's just amazing. And if I have the chance, I just lean over the instrument panel and just press my face against the window, and it's just unbelievable what you can see. And most of these blog posts, I write them when I'm home. So when I'm flying, I have no creativity. I just soak in all the experiences and the views, and I let it brew for a while, and then later on at home, I just put it into words and pictures. But those moments are just serene. It's just beautiful. And then you're sitting there, especially flying over the ocean. It's just pure blackness below, and it's just different kind of blackness above with all the stars. And that's something really profound. And especially if there's no other reference, so there's no other airplanes, or there are no clouds around, it feels like you're just suspended in midair and you're just gazing out over a void. And that's mind blowing. I must say, some of my colleagues, I know they don't like it. They prefer to fly with the lights on and not stare into the abyss. Personally, I find it beautiful. I find it peaceful, and I just enjoy it. It gives me peace of mind, complete peace of mind. And that's one of the things that I really like about flying, because we don't have Wi-Fi on board, you don't have data roaming, whatever. So you're completely disconnected from the world, disconnected from agendas, disconnected from people who send me emails or whatever. And especially if you're disconnected from the earth and flying over such a remote area, it just adds to the peaceful feeling you have there, at least for me personally.
So have you ever been flying with someone and you turn the lights off in the cockpit and the other pilot goes, turn that shit back on? Like, I can't handle this right now.
Well, many times also because
Yeah.
many of my colleagues they don't even appreciate the beauty that we see from above. So, and that's not a negative thing. It's just I mean, there's so many individual people with so many individual preferences, but many of my colleagues they don't even see the beauty that I try to capture with my camera, or that I enjoy looking at. So, for many colleagues, they just put the lights on and just read a magazine, and they don't even look out of the window. The cool thing is now I'm captain, and my co-pilots they just they just have to endure it if I switch the lights off because yeah, that's the benefit of being the captain in the cockpit. I basically decide how I want to have the lighting done and if I want to dim the lights. But most of the colleagues by now they know me, they know I'm a photographer, and they know I enjoy these views. So there's not even any discussion anymore. But especially when I was still flying as a co-pilot, it happened quite often that the captain just switched on the lights, just a floodlight, just to basically flood the cockpit with all the bright lights and not look out of the window. And that's really painful sometimes, especially if there's bright northern lights everywhere, or when
Mm.
you're flying through a meteor storm. It's just beautiful to capture it. But some of the colleagues in the past they couldn't care less, so they just put the lights on and that's it. So yeah, that's part of
Yeah,
life, I guess.
I can imagine both ways because to have that ability to look out of the cockpit and see things like the northern lights, or even if it's just the normal darkness, the normal abyss, or sunrise, sunset, something like that, to have that available and to not want to look at that and appreciate that seems insane. On the other hand, I have been in situations where I'm in almost total darkness. I went caving once, and we shut off our headlamps, and we were like, all right, we're gonna just sit here for 2 minutes and sit in total darkness. And the first 30 seconds was really fucking weird, and I started to get anxious. But then after that, once my eyes adjusted, and it's kind of like, okay, it's dark. It was actually kind of cool. Like I'd never sat in complete darkness before. I know the cockpit isn't like that because you obviously have lights and you need to see things, but just having that dark expanse in front of you, I imagine can be, extremely stimulating one way or the other. Anxiety or beauty, appreciation, awesomeness.
Definitely. And it's also, I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to become a pilot when I was very young, because I was just so, so impressed with all the beautiful views and just looking at the world from literally a perspective from above, or from a unique perspective. And that's something yeah, that's even amplified if you're flying at night, and especially with the lights off. It just yeah, it's just mind blowing, really beautiful. So, and also, yeah, I think this is also the main motivation why I started to take pictures from a young age, because I was just so taken away by these perspectives, and knowing it's unique. We're the second or the third generation of human beings who can actually see the world from that perspective. So
Mm.
when I'm flying, I want to document it, and especially knowing that there are just only well, let's say there are not too many pilots who really appreciate the almost poetic beauty of flight. And well, I'm in the lucky position that I'm able to carry a camera with me and document it. So it's a couple of factors coming together, and that resulted in me basically, yeah, just enjoying the views even more.
Yeah. So before you ever had the inkling to become a professional pilot, do you remember the first feeling you got where you thought flying could be not even just a career, like where you felt the pull towards flying, and it was something that you wanted to do, something that you could see yourself spending a lot of time doing, whether you were getting, paid to do it or not?
Yeah, definitely. And it's actually one of the first memories I have as a small child. I think I was 2 or 2.5 years old, and I flew together with my mom to the United States in a 747-200. I still remember so many details. And I was sitting next to the window, and I was just glued to the window, just amazed by the views of Greenland, of the clouds, and the whole sensation of being in the air and flying. and the whole technology of a big jet airliner were just so impressive to me. Later on, I flew
Mm.
again when I was 4 years old, so it's really in the forming years of my life, and it was the same experience. Again, I was just completely taken away by the views and by the sensation of flight, and I think that really planted the seed in my young brain.
Yeah. So when did you go into aviation as a teenager, as a student? Were you set on that track, or were you doing something else first, and then you went back to flying?
Well, funny enough, the need to become a pilot actually only grew much later. It was only after I turned 14. I still remember I was walking from the high school to the train station to go home, and from one moment to another, it just hit me like a lightning strike, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to be a pilot. And this is really something that came out of nowhere, but I made a decision for myself there. And the funny thing is that after that moment, my grades went up as well, because all of a sudden it was literally from one day to another. I had the motivation to study, I had the motivation to get my papers. And from there on, I just focused everything in my life to become a pilot. I started taking flying lessons on a glider airplane and soon just progressed through motorized flying. So, funny enough, the fascination with flights and aviation started when I was really young, but the decision to actually become a pilot started when I was 14 years old, and from there on it went really fast.
Wow. So it was an instant spark of inspiration while you were walking, just out of nowhere, it just hits you. I'm gonna be a pilot, and then from that moment, like you turned it on.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm still wondering what caused this thought or this realization. But it really brought me where I am today. So I guess sometimes things happen in life that we don't have an explanation for, but it happens for the right reasons, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I've heard people in various careers that talk about a sort of instant spark of this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I had a much different experience with production and podcasting. I almost started doing it by accident, and then over the course of a few months, I started to realize how much I enjoyed it and had this gradual, you know, awakening. Sounds like a cheesy thing to say, but just a feeling that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I've spoken to a few other people who have also had that sort of like instant. They're walking down the street, they're on the treadmill. Usually walking is involved, so maybe there's something that has to do with putting your body in motion, and then they're just like, all right, like this is like I'm walking out the door of this gym or I'm walking off this train, and this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life.
Interesting. Yeah, it reminds me of some moments that I have now and then when I have a surge of creativity. It might be related to something from the subconscious mind. It's coming to the surface all of a sudden. But sometimes I'm driving a car or I'm sitting on a couch, whatever, and I have this urge to start writing, or I finally have almost a breakthrough in how I want to structure a new blog. Sometimes I just write some narratives and they don't really fit together, and then all of a sudden I literally feel an itch here on this side of my my brain, and have to run to the computer because I realize that this is like a creative breakthrough that I really want
Wow.
to use. And actually, in retrospect, this might be the same subconscious process that's happening when let's say, when I was 14 years old, when I had the urge to become a pilot. It's not really comparable because the creative part is kind of different than choosing a career, but I think yeah, it might be related.
Yeah, there are people that think, and I have thought this way more and more as I'm thinking about creativity and ideas, how people get in touch with like actionizing their creative ideas and making something out of it. There are people that think that we're all just vessels for making things, and that there are ideas floating around in the universe, it's forms of waves or things that we don't yet understand. And the people that are most open to receiving these sorts of ideas and information are the ones who end up creating it. And that there are many vessels for different sorts of ideas that maybe other people with the same skills aren't as open to. and for whatever reason the ideas align with the person, that person manifests it and it comes out into the world. So it's not like we're internally generating our own ideas, but like they're all just bouncing around out there. And then if you're open to it, your mind is clear, you sort of start to get in tune with that idea, and you have a moment where it hits you and you're like, holy shit, I need to draw this thing, I need to take this photo, I need to record this podcast, whatever it is. And the more that I think about creativity, the more that I think along those lines, because like I have no idea where ideas come from. Like I like to think that I'm good enough to make them up, or I'm good enough to make all these split-second decisions during podcasts. Which direction do I go? What question do I ask? Whatever. But it just appears, and there's no like, I'm not like thinking really hard. Like I'm constipated. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna ask like this question, and then, like it just like pops into my head for whatever reason. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's something to that, like us being vessels for ideas that are kind of just floating around.
Interesting. It's closely connected to intuition as well, and it can be like you say when you try to direct a podcast or a conversation. It could be related to creative ideas, but also musicians, for example, or even mathematicians. They often talk when they have a breakthrough. Sorry, they often say that if they have a breakthrough or if they have a eureka moment, it just comes out of nowhere. And I think creativity and intuition are really closely connected. For example, most of the blogs, most of the narratives I write, they just write themselves. It's really kind of scary sometimes because I don't know if you've seen, but I'm actually pretty active on social media. So, for example, if I have an Instagram post, I write a small narrative that comes together with the picture to basically give it some depth. And often I just open up my laptop and I put one of the pictures I want to write about on the right hand side of the screen, and I open up the Word file on the writing file on the other side, and I just write, and it just comes. And sometimes I even don't even know where it's coming from because as you realize and notice, I'm not a native English speaker. I'm Dutch, so English is a second language for me. But the writing in English, it comes much more natural than my writing in Dutch. And sometimes I'm even writing sentences with words that I'm not sure what they mean. I have to look them up and say, okay, yeah, actually it makes sense. And I've been thinking about it
Yeah.
very long, and I was wondering, it might be like you say that this is almost like a spiritual or mystical appearance of creative stuff. On the other hand, it could be a subconscious process as well. For example, I'm reading a lot, so I'm reading a lot of books, and it could be that some structures in sentences are just buried really deep down in my subconscious, and they're coming to the surface the moment I'm writing. Then again, I think it was Vangelis, the musician, who had his own philosophy about music, and he said he was just a conduit for music that's floating in the, let's say, in the universe. I don't know what to think about it. It's kind of too mystical for me, but I know that a lot of musicians and a lot of creative artists, they feel that they're just a conduit for something else. They're just an instrument instead of the creator.
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever it is an odd and glorious feeling, especially when writing, because I write out a lot of ideas for the podcast, and often I'll like just do stream of thought and cut it down, or even just write some blog posts here and there. But like you can feel it when you're writing and the ideas are coming instantly. Because for me, I don't know about you, but most of the time I end up writing something shit, and then out of that shit will come like something that's better. But I'll start out, I just tell myself I'm going to write anything right now in the next 30 minutes, and whatever comes out, and if it's shitty, that's fine. But then there are other times where as soon as my hands hit the keyboard, this something comes out that ends up being close to the final product, and I have no idea why it's that way sometimes. And then other times it's like, well, I'm just doing this to get through the shitty part until I get to something good.
Yeah, definitely. I have exactly the same. And sometimes I'm writing a really long piece. Actually, I'm limited by the character limit on Instagram, which is I think 2,200 characters. So I really have to tone down the narrative. Sometimes I just write a long piece and then I have to delete half of it. Other times, like you say, the first version is just perfect as it is, and that's really funny to see. And as I
Hmm.
said before, I think it was last year. I have no clue why, but I was writing two parts of the blog. One was about I think it was the Second World War, and the lower part was what I was seeing right there at that moment in the picture. And I had these two basically captions next to each other, and I wanted to use them for the same picture. And I was really wondering, so why did I write this? Because there's no way I can connect these two. It doesn't make any sense. So I left it there, and after about a month, I was reading it again. And I think I was busy cooking or walking. And then all of a sudden, it hit me like that. I realized, well, if I add this little sentence in between, it connects these two perfectly. And that's what I did. I wrote it down, I posted it, and it was received really well by a
Yeah.
lot of followers. And that really made me wonder, did the structure already exist, but I only realized later how to connect them? Or is it maybe something else? It's really intriguing.
Yeah. So once you had that moment of inspiration, I assume you're going to school at that point because what year did you have that spark where you were like this is gonna be it?
The flying career, you mean?
Yeah, the flying career.
Yeah, so I was 14, so that must have been, let me think, 1997.
Okay, so 14 years old, you have that lightning bolt of inspiration. What do you do after that? Do you just immediately start looking for flight schools?
Well, basically, I'm coming from a family that has no ties in aviation whatsoever. So I was completely clueless. I didn't know any pilots. I never seen a pilot in real life. So I just started calling flight schools. This was pre-internet era, of course. So I got a lot of folders from flight schools, and I realized, if I really want to become a pilot, I have to have at least this level of education. I have
Mm.
to do this. I have to do that. And actually, my uncle, he was really happy to see that I was so motivated. He said, you know what? It was, I think it was a summer holiday. He said, you know what? Let's go to the airport and get you in a glider and see if you actually like flying. And the moment I was flying there, of course, I had some experience with Microsoft Flight Simulator, just the basics of flight. So I knew how the controls were working. So at least I knew the basics. And this flight instructor, he was sitting behind me, and yeah, you have to imagine I'm 14 years old. I'm just flying a glider,
Yeah.
and he actually said he was kind of impressed that I had some motivation.
Wow.
Sorry, that I had some talent. And I think this was exactly the right nudge that I needed to take it even to the next level. So I started looking into taking flying lessons, and yeah, then once you're with one foot in this little world of aviation, you get to know people, you get to know how the whole industry is working, etc. And I just took it basically from there, step by step. So it was first the lightning bolt of inspiration to become a pilot, and then the first time I was flying an airplane, that this instructor was actually telling me that at least in his eyes, I had some talent, which was exactly the right boost that I needed. So in retrospect, it's funny to see how little moments, little sometimes insignificant moments, can really push you into the right direction.
Yeah. So the glider, is that a propeller plane or what is because I'm picturing it in my head. I just want to make sure I have the right thing in mind.
The gliders, they're really unpowered airplanes. So with a cable, they basically pull it up into the air. Let's say at 300 meters, I guess less, 300 meters. So that's let's say around 1,000 feet. They disconnect the cable. You can just glide your way down, and sometimes you can pick up some thermals. So it's like rising hot air. And if you do it correctly, the glider can actually fly for hours and hours. But this is
Wow.
this is the level of aviation that most of the pilots actually start in because it's affordable. It's much less expensive than motorized flying. So and it's very basic. So you really have to. Oh, no, you don't have to, but you really get used to the sensation of flying, and you really learn the basics of flying really well. So glider flying is the first step that many pilots take.
Was there a feeling or a sensation that surprised you the most about flying a plane the first time? Like something, that any simulator can't teach you, something where you were like, holy shit, like I did not expect this at all.
The noise. It's
The
actually the
noise.
glider. Yeah, the glider. These gliders, they're very noisy. That's something that really surprised me. But what really stuck with me is that I really felt at home. I thought, okay, this is it. I'm just in love with flying, and I felt so sorry when we had to land again. But just the sensation of being up there, and then finally, actually, with me behind the controls, it was like coming home. It just felt so natural. So yeah, that was the right push for me.
And I could go do this right now without a license. I could go to an airport where they have gliders and just go up like that and fly it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and many flight schools, they offer some introduction lessons, even on a small Cessna with, let's say, a piston engine. You can just take a flying lesson and see if you like it. So I started with
Mm.
glider flying because this was the easiest option for me as a 14-year-old. But many people, they just take flying lessons, and you can just start with a small propeller airplane and see if you like it. So the instructor will sit next to you. Of course, they will give you small briefing explaining what the steering wheel is doing, and what not to do, especially what not to do. But then you just fly for an hour and have some fun. And for many people, this is the first step into either choosing a career in aviation or deciding if they want to get their pilot license
Mm.
eventually.
What was your first job in flying?
Actually, after I finished my flight training, there was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken, the whole market was completely uh, yeah. There were basically
S-
no jobs for any pilots. So I had
saturated, yeah.
yeah, definitely. And no airline was hiring. So for almost a year, I worked at a small flying school. And basically, we were renting out airplanes and giving some introduction lessons. So once in a while, I did some sightseeing flights, but most of the time, I was just cleaning the hangar and doing all the administrative work, just hoping for an invitation by a big airline. And almost after, I guess, a year, I got my first invitation by a small Dutch airline if I wanted to come and applied with them. So it was a long road until I had my first real job in aviation. But it's in retrospect, it was kind of good because I'm kind of proud how I built it up from literally from scratch to cleaning aircraft hangars and cleaning the airplanes to building my way up to commercial flying.
And with the Dutch airline, with that first job, were you flying around Europe, or where were you? Where was your area mostly?
It's kind of complicated. This first airline I'm flying for, I used to fly for, they were specialized in ACMI operations, and that means they are leasing out their airplanes, including crew, to other airlines. So they didn't have their own routes, but they were basically just flying for other companies. So I was trained on the turboprop as a co-pilot. It was the Fokker 50. F50 turboprop, and I know how
Fokker
the name.
50.
Yeah, I know
I
how
like
the
it.
yeah, I know how the name Fokker sounds in the English language, and you can imagine all the jokes, especially since it was a very slow airplane. So all the pilots making fun of the slow Fokker. But
Oh yeah.
anyway, I was flying the F50 as a co-pilot, and we had multiple contracts. We were flying for I think 5 or 6 different European airlines, flying in Greece, in Scandinavia, we're flying for KLM as well, all over Europe. And eventually, the company also got contracts for African airlines and military contract work in Afghanistan, and that was really something else because first of all, I was still inexperienced. I'm still getting the hang of it of flying commercially with all the pressure and even the Fokker 50 is a rather small airplane. It's still kind of complicated and complex. So I was still getting used to flying commercially, and then you're being sent to Africa and fly there, and that was really like I was being thrown in the deep end of the swimming pool. But it was amazing. It was really cool, and especially flying the operations in Africa and Afghanistan. It was like Indiana Jones movie, but on steroids. It was amazing.
Yeah. What? So, do you have any stories that stand out from that time? We'll talk about Africa first, but I've, you know, I know that the infrastructure in Africa is not the greatest, so I imagine flying there comes with a lot of, improvisation and adventure going around to different places. Can you tell a story about that time and kind of talk about that time where you were flying over Africa?
I can probably write whole books about what happened there. It's every day was an adventure, and we were based. Actually, I was flying for a couple of different companies. Some of them Saharan, and some of them Sub-Saharan. So that means basically we did flights out of the capital, one of those countries, all over the Sahara, picking up people there and dropping them off there. But also the Sub-Saharan companies, for example, in Nigeria or these kind of operations in countries were completely different. But to give you an example, one day we were flying in this African company, in the Saharan company, and we were just ready for a whole flight, a whole day of flying, six flights all over the country and coming back to the capital at the end of the day. And all of a sudden, one of the handling agents, he comes to the cockpit and he gives us a little note just on a piece of paper with a GPS coordinates. He said, "Ah, you have to go here. It's a change in the schedule. You have to go here." So
Just a
we were
piece of
looking at
paper.
that's it, and
I
we were
get,
wondering,
yeah, there's,
is there an airport? And what do you want us to do there? So well, yeah, just go there. You can land there. Okay, well, the Fokker 50 is kind of a versatile airplane, but you cannot just land it so randomly anywhere. So in the end, we just took enough fuel. If there's nothing there, we just go back to the capital and we just have a look and see what's there. So after about 2 hours of flying, we just descended towards the point that we entered in the navigation computer, and there seemed to be something like a gravel runway, but it was a makeshift airport. So we made a couple of flybys just to chase off all the animals and people, and eventually we landed there. We shut down the engines, and sure enough, there was a small pickup truck just leaving a huge dust trail driving up to the airport, and apparently there were passengers that were waiting for us to arrive, and we loaded those passengers in, and we went back to the other airports. It was just one of those improvisation moments that you realize that flying there is, oh, actually life in Africa is just completely different to compared to yeah, so let's say Europe or the United States. One other time we were flying also in one of these Saharan countries, and we flew to a small airport that we finally found, and we landed there, and the local, let's say, handling agent or the local travel agency, I think this guy sold maybe 300 tickets for our airplane, and we only have 50 seats in the airplane because it's such a really
yeah,
such a small airplane.
just,
And you have
just
to,
slightly oversold,
yeah, and
just
of course
only
there
by
was,
250 people.
and you have to imagine. I mean, there's no terminal there. There's no security. There's nothing. People just rush and run to the air to the airplane, and they were literally fighting to get on board. And at one point, I think people were just crawling all over each other in the cabin, and we were just sitting there because there was no security agent. There was nothing. What do? You just have to improvise and go with the flow. So these are just two small examples of how flying is really different. It's completely different. It's a mindset that's different. It's yeah, it's quite something. It's quite something.
Yeah, when I'm flying out of airports in America and Europe, I wish I could just bum rush the gate and be the first one to get on the plane. So it's good to know that there are countries out there that have that policy, like first come, first serve. If you can get on the plane before the doors close, it's yours.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It was quite something. But a couple of times also when we were flying in those countries, most of the airlines, they are the only method of transportation for the country because the infrastructure is just not there. So many times we had a couple of flights, and this flight schedule. The published flight schedule is more like a suggestion than an actual timetable. So we just leave whenever there's fuel and when the passengers are ready. And quite often there was like the local minister or the local president. He wanted to visit this little town as well. So the president or the prime minister, he was just jumping up the airplane and kicking off some of his own passengers. And basically we landed somewhere and we had about 30 minutes on the ground. And after 30 minutes, we had to leave again because we had a time schedule and all the rest of the passengers were waiting. So apparently the president of this little country, he got out and there was a whole ceremony, children dancing for this president. And it was like a big ceremony with welcoming this president. And after 45 minutes, we were wondering, how long is this going to take? Because we have to leave again. And the passengers in the back of the airplane, they were almost revolting. They said, "Oh, I have to make my connecting flight here and there." And all of a sudden, you try to suggest maybe to the security detail, the president, like, well, really nice that you have this ceremony here, but we have to start moving again. But you have to realize that in some of those countries, having let's say, criticism on the president is not really appreciated. So a couple of times the security agents around the president they were getting really aggressive with us and arming their AK-47s at us, saying, "Well, this is the president. You have no influence on his schedule." So we were
Yeah.
just completely stuck between a rock and a hard place because the passengers were revolting and the security detail of the president was not allowing us to do anything there. So it's an absurd situation, and only afterwards that you realize, well, it's actually kind of special that you experience these things as a European pilot, because as I said, this only happens in Africa, and there are only so many pilots flying for African airlines. So this was really something, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. I could talk for hours about just flying in Africa.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine, just because in America you would never have a high level politician mixing with just like normal people like myself on a flight. If I look to my right and Barack Obama or Donald Trump with Biden, whoever was just like sitting there, I'd be like, what the hell is going on? Like, our country is screwed. Did we lose the money to fund the Air Force One? What's happened? Like, that would be such a like, it would be cool, but it would be so weird to see such a high level guy just sitting there on the plane with, us peasants.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one thing if there's just a high level politician flying with you, but especially in Africa, some of these countries where we were flying were really politically unstable. So one day the guy is a president and everybody loves him, and the next day they're trying to kill him because he basically was how do you say this? He was taken off the throne by a military coup or something. So okay,
Yeah,
actually,
cool.
yeah, exactly. So a couple of times we had it that after a full day of flying, we returned to the capital of the country, and we found out in the hotel that there was a military coup in the country, and that the president was trying to flee. And then you realize, well, the guy that we carry tomorrow with all his suitcases and security detail, wearing a sporty sunglasses, etc., that's probably one of the presidents or one of the high-level politicians that they're looking for. So all of a sudden, it's not just a funny experience to have one of these politicians with you, but there's a big security risk as well. It wouldn't be the first time if the military is shooting down airplanes with presidents that are fleeing the country. So this is also one of the instances where we realize that flying in Africa can be a lot of fun. It can be a really interesting adventure, but it can be very unpredictable as well. And that's something that you only realize if you're really exposed to those kind of situations.
Did you have any close calls where you thought there would be a serious threat to a terrorist coming on the plane, or someone trying to take out a high level politician, blowing up the plane, whatever, while you were flying?
Yeah, I have to be a bit careful, but actually, it was one of those situations where we found out that there was a military coup. The next day, we had a charter flight out of the country, and the moment we saw the passenger arriving, we realized that it was the ex-president that was trying to flee the country. And most of those African countries, they basically there's hardly any traffic flying there. So we were taking off, and because we flew that route quite often before, and the tower would just say, you know what, make a left turn and fly direct to whatever you want, just fuck off. But in this case, the air traffic controller gave us very clear directions to fly in how do you say this? To basically make another turn and fly to a position really far deep into the Sahara before we could actually turn south towards the other country. And my captain and
Yeah,
I,
like a
we were looking.
stopover.
Well, not
Stop.
really a stopover, but he gave us a very uncommon departure
Oh,
route
odd route. Okay.
toward. Yeah. So my captain and I, we were looking at each other, and my captain said, "I'm not going to do that." And he said, "Just say okay that you will that you acknowledge the departure route," because I was doing the radio and my captain was flying. And basically, he took off and he just switched off the lights, the landing lights, and we turned over the sea. We first flew about 100 miles over the sea before we went south. And later on, my captain explains. He said, "Well, there's a big chance that they know we have the president on board, and I don't want to run the risk of being shut down." And the fact that we got this really strange clearance to fly over a really remote area over the Sahara, and the fact that we had this ex-president on board, and the whole situation was really tense and really strange. And it's only in retrospect that you realize Wow, this is something else, and of course nothing happened in the end. But you don't want to run the risk, and it wouldn't be the first time, especially in those kind of unstable countries where private jets or airplanes with former presidents are targeted. So in the end, nobody shot at us, but it could have ended completely differently, and there's no way of knowing what would have happened if we took the actual departure clearance. But yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah, there's one story that I want to ask you about because I this is the other blog post that I read, and I'm assuming this aligns with the same time you're flying over Africa because it takes place there. You wrote a blog called "A Very Close Call Over the Sahara." For people listening, and for myself too, because reading it probably doesn't do the experience justice. But like in your words now, like what was that close call? Because it seems like too close to be true. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was. I know which blog post you're referring to. This was a really close call, unintentionally. It was at night, and we were flying also with the F-15 turboprop, flying back from one of those, let's say, outstations back to the capital of this Saharan country. And you have to realize that air traffic control in those countries is not as sophisticated as we have in Europe or in let's say in the United States. They don't have radar there. They're basically plotting on the paper chart the positions of airplanes. And I do that by asking the pilots, "What's your position? What's your radial?" So basically, they're asking the pilots what their distance to a certain navigation beacon is and their relative bearing. And they just plot it on the chart, and they plot it with all the airplanes, and then they give us some clearance to either go left or right or descend and climb. And I was giving my position plots to air traffic control, and I was listening to other traffic over my headset as well. And it's not really that busy. And all of a sudden, I realized that there was an airplane giving his position that was eerily similar to ours. And my captain, I think he was reading a book or was doing something else. So I already notified him, and I said, "Well, we have to be careful now because there can be a confusion in position of airplanes." But then again, every airplane has a system on board which is called TCAS, and it stands for Traffic Collision Avoidance System, and it means that all the airplanes that have TCAS on board, they communicate with each other, and they warn the pilots if we're getting too close to each other. We also
Mm.
see, basically on our navigation display, we see all the traffic around us. That's indicating how high they're flying or the relative position to us. And we had no traffic on our navigation display whatsoever. I just heard the other pilot talking in my headset about this position. So my captain said, "Well, the moment we see him on the navigation display, we'll know where he is, and it'll be fine." So at one point, the other traffic again, I was really attuned to this guy because I had this uncanny feeling that he must have been pretty close. And the controller of the airport basically cleared this other traffic, which was a really big jetliner, to descend through our level, basically to start his approach to the airport. And all of a sudden, it was pitch black night. All of a sudden, I see the airplane just descending just in front of us, and it must have been seconds from impact. And probably the other pilots of the big jetliner, they've never seen us because we were a really small turboprop. It was dark, so I don't think they've ever seen us, especially coming from an angle like coming from our let's say 8 o'clock descending through our level. So the other pilots probably have never seen us, and my captain and I, we just looked at the huge machine that was just descending through our level, and within a second it was gone. So it was happening within a second. There was nothing we could have done, and it was really close call. And yeah, then you realize that not all airplanes in Africa, they have this TCAS system, which is mandatory, but you're just completely dependent on the maintenance level of other airplanes. And in this case, air traffic controller, even though he should have known where we were, it didn't it didn't send an alarm off with him. So as I said, I had the feeling something was off because these numbers were eerily correct, and then all of a sudden you see it happening. The airplane descends through our level within a second. Danger is gone, but this is a really strange feeling of being completely helpless there in that spot and position. And then, of course, you file some reports. You say, "Oh, we had a near miss. This happened." But in Africa, I mean, nobody nobody cares there. So the report is probably being read and just being thrown away, and that's it. So this kind of stuff that happens probably quite often. I was just lucky that that I survived it. But it's Africa. It's Africa. I know, especially when we were flying in Africa, we had this saying. It's quite famous saying, TIA. This is Africa. It's like the excuse for basically go with the flow and yeah, TIA. This
Yeah,
is Africa.
that's crazy to be relying on dots on a piece of paper to not have a collision with another airplane. So that airplane just didn't have the system, or its system was turned off or something.
Could be as well, or maybe it was faulty, or maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the
Yeah.
pilots never switched it on, or I don't know. I don't know. Even nowadays, when we were flying with our commercial airliners to, let's say, to Johannesburg, so we basically fly from Europe all the way to the southern part of Africa. We basically cross all those countries, and what we constantly do, we not only talking with every country with the air traffic controller, but we also make position reports to all the other pilots that are flying the same route. So every time I'm crossing another airway, because there's like highways in the air, which we call airways, where all the traffic is flying. Every time we cross another airway, we make a position report on a common frequency, so that if there are other pilots flying out there, they know exactly where we are, and we keep each other in the loop, because you have to be very vigilant in those countries. So yeah, it's not a unique incident, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
then again, there are so few accidents, relatively seen, that it's a major airspace. So the airplanes are quite small in comparison. So that's
I
yeah.
I can't imagine that seeing a plane, borderline smash into you, your co-pilot doesn't see it. If there are passengers on the plane, none of them see it, and you're just sitting there like, holy fucking shit. We
Yeah,
almost just exploded in the sky.
yeah, and we had about 50 passengers in the back with a couple of stewardesses, etc. Well, this other airplane, it was a TriStar. It must have carried maybe 300 passengers. So in total, there were about 350 people almost gone from existence. And there were just two Dutch pilots who actually saw it happening, and it was over within a second. And that's a really strange realization.
Do you know if it's gotten better since in Africa? Because this was like 20 years ago,
Yeah, I know
something.
from experience that, for example, some of the countries where I'm still flying to nowadays, sometimes you see it has been improved. Air traffic controllers, especially at bigger airports, they get training from American or European air traffic controllers, so you see the level of safety going up. But then again, some of the countries, especially the politically unstable countries, it's sometimes just still a mess. And
Hmm.
I must say the training we get nowadays as commercial pilots when we're going to fly to Africa is quite good. So we're being told what to expect, and be vigilant. For example, when you hear traffic over the radio, be very vigilant with what you hear, and be proactive in things. But flying in Africa, it's quite something. Yeah.
Yeah. So Afghanistan was after this, or when were you based out of there?
Basically, the company started flying in Africa and later got a contract in Afghanistan, flying for the ISAF. And then after a while, it was both mixed. Some months I was
Hmm.
flying in Afghanistan, some months in Africa. But the first time I went to Afghanistan was in 2006, and I think I was in Afghanistan about 3 or 4 months in 2006, and later on I went again in 2008. But in 2006, I spent quite some time in Kabul, and that was really something. We were flying for I think it was the Norwegian Army, and they didn't have any airplanes themselves that could fly there. So they what the military is often doing is they hire these contractors that can do the transport. How do you say this? Like the aerial transport work for them.
Hmm.
So the Norwegian Army they hired our airplane for roughly 80 flying hours a month, and especially in 2006, it wasn't really that busy yet. So we were only flying maybe 20 hours domestic flights out of Kabul for the Norwegian Army, and the rest of the time we were just basically doing nothing. But of course, after a couple of months, a couple of weeks, the other nations that were also based in Kabul. They realized that we didn't have too much work on our hands. So very often when we were sitting in the evening at dinner, there was one of the Dutch officers came to us, or the Americans or the Canadians. They're asking, "Hey guys, can you do some flights for us tomorrow, or can you fly to this and this place?" So in the end, we flew for a lot of different nations, and we flew to a lot of different domestic airports and cities in Afghanistan, and that was really something, because
Yeah.
flying in Africa, you have to be vigilant, but flying in an active war zone where there's a lot of military operation going on, where air traffic control is limited, not because they're really bad, because it was basically taken care of by the Americans, so did all the air traffic control. But Afghanistan consists of mostly mountains. The Fokker 50 cannot really fly high. So the moment you pass one of the mountains, there's no line of sight contact, radio contact anymore with any radar or radio operator. So after takeoff, we were basically pretty much on our own, because there was just simply no possible way to get into radio contact. So you're literally all by yourself there, and you just have to find your way. And that was really adventurous, all in all. Yeah.
So you're flying through, it's the Hindu Kush, right, in Afghanistan, and you have limited communications. 2006. So like you said, this is a pretty violent wartime in Afghanistan. Did you ever have any incidents or close calls where there were factions stationed in the mountains that would shoot at you, or just any sort of potential attack that you had to thwart, whether it be a missile or bullets or things like that?
Well, the Fokker 50 was not equipped with any warning systems. So I think most military airplanes, they have a warning system that they're being alerted when they're being targeted by a radar tracker or some missile. So we were flying blissfully unaware of anything that was aimed at us. I must say, I've never seen any rockets being launched at us, etc. But yeah, so okay. During the fight, I don't think I've seen any actual shooting at our airplane, but we were most vulnerable. Airplanes are most vulnerable when they're actually on the ground. And for terrorists or for military factions, it's much easier to shoot at an airplane that's on the ground or that's even parked than try to shoot it out of the air. So, based in Kabul, the airport is in the middle of the city, surrounded by some big hills. Quite often, it happened that some militants, they basically fired RPGs or mortars or any kind of weapons towards the airport in hoping to hit one of the airplanes. So it happened more than a handful of occasions that we were being shot at. The whole airport was being
Yeah.
shot at by mortars and missiles. So we had to run into the bunker and to basically wait until the all clear signal was given. And a couple of times we also flew to one of these remote gravel strips, and there was not really air traffic control, but one of the local military officers, they had this little handheld radio that we could call in by, and they could tell us if the airport was clear. So not just clear of vehicles on the runway, but also clear of potential militants around, and they would clear us for landing. And a couple of times it happened that we were just in front of the runway, and the guy started screaming through the headphones, "Oh, go around, go around. You have to go back to Kabul because right now they're starting to shoot here." And it's really strange because you're just sitting there and you're looking out over the windows. You see this little runway, and there's nothing happening there. But apparently, the guy on the ground is noticing some fighting there. So the first thing you do is just hit the power levers and just get out of there. And that's really surreal because you realize you're very close to being shot at, but you don't see it visually, and that's interesting. That's a very interesting experience.
Yeah, and it's not like you could just put your full attention on not being shot at, because you're still a pilot. You're still flying a plane. You're still maneuvering, going through the mountains, all destinations, all the things involved, the tedious aspects of flying through the sky that I know nothing about. But it's not like you could just, sit there trying to, thwart missiles or bullets. So I can't imagine. I can't imagine going, even flying for 5 minutes in an area where you would not be, there would be no warning if something was shot at you. The only warning would be, I guess you would hear it at the last second, but then it would be too late. And you also just have to focus on your job and be like, I hope no one shoots a missile at me today. Let's, fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny. The first time I was flying out of Kabul because we were basically sent in as passengers there. The airplane was already based there and flying around, so we took over from another crew. And the first time I was taking off from Kabul, actually my captain was flying and I was doing the radio, and I was really anxious and I was constantly looking out because we had to circle over the city a couple of times to gain altitude because the airport is very high above sea level. It's within the mountains, so in a really confined airspace, you have to circle a couple of times to gain altitudes before you can cross over the mountains. And the moment we were turning, from my window, I could see the entire city. And I was constantly looking out, just wondering if I see some rocket or missile shooting at us, which is kind of ridiculous, but you're flying in a war zone. But after the fourth time, maybe 10th time, you don't even care anymore. If you're going to be shot at, well, yeah, what are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. And besides, the chances of being shot at are so remote. So it's interesting to see how quickly you switch from being kind of nervous to just accepting it and go about your day. That's really interesting. And yeah, it has something fatalistic about it as well because certain risks you can avoid. For example, when you're flying, and especially if you're flying in the clouds, you have to be very vigilant of where the mountains are. And if you start descending, you have to make sure that you descend not too early, not too late, so you don't fly into the mountains. But this is stuff that you can control yourself. This is something that you have an influence on. So we're really vigilant in making those decisions. But being shot at by some guy with a missile, there's nothing you can do about it. So I mean, yeah, airplanes are flying there every day for the last 50, 60 years, and only a handful of them have been shot down. So just go with the flow. And
Yeah,
yeah,
I, I imagine the adrenaline can get a little bit of addicting too. Once you acclimate to it, I'm assuming your job now as a pilot comes with a lot less risk than when you were flying over Afghanistan. Do you ever have moments where you miss the excitement of, like maybe I'll get shot down today, maybe I won't? Like you're just like beyond the fear of it, just the adventure of flying through an area like that.
yeah, definitely. And it's actually, I noticed the moment I stepped out of the airplane for the first time in Kabul, I just fell in love with the country. And I don't know why, but there is something so profoundly mystical about Afghanistan. So on a personal level, I just fell in love with the country, with the deep blue sky and the beautiful mountains. So that made it really fun to fly there as well. Um, but it's especially in retrospect that I realized I really, really loved the adventure and the adrenaline because I did that for about 2 years. But all that time flying the turboprop, I had the mindset of I have to build flying hours, and if I have enough flying hours, I can finally apply for a real airline and fly the big jets and have a fancy uniform, whatever. And the moment it was in 2007, I was hired on the 737, flying for quite a good Dutch airline, flying passengers all over Europe. I realized I was missing the adventure. There is how do you say this? There was a realization that this kind of adrenaline can be really addictive, and that's
Mm.
quite interesting to realize because I'm not really an adrenaline junkie, but flying there in Afghanistan and just living those adventures, and it's not so much about being shut down because I think the risks are relatively low, but it's the total package of adventure of having
Mm.
different experiences every day, and that's something that's it's only in retrospect I realized it was really really addictive, and fortunately, I made the decision to progress with my career because a couple of my friends they stayed in this contract business and they've been flying in and out of Afghanistan and Africa for a long time, and they had a really hard time adjusting to the professional level of commercial flying.
Mm.
And for me, fortunately, I wasn't. How do you say this? I was still flexible enough to make that transition to the really disciplined procedural wise flying of commercial flying. But for pilots who stay in this world of cowboy flying, let's say, it's really difficult and sometimes unpleasant to make this transition. So in retrospect, I made the right decision at the right time to move ahead. Um, but I do miss it. I still miss it. And then again, unfortunately, I still have the pictures and I still have the memories, which will last a lifetime. But sometimes yeah, I would like to do it again. Yeah, especially with the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you taking photos all throughout that time, or when did you start getting serious about the photography in the air?
The photography pretty much started from the first time I flew as a student pilot, because immediately I was captivated by the views, and how extremely beautiful flight is. So the photography pretty much started early on, but it only got more serious basically after I went to Afghanistan for the first time, and also flying in Africa, because I realized I'm literally in a unique position to capture everything. And there are only a handful of pilots able to see and document it. But especially flying there in Afghanistan, flying in Africa, it's unique.
Mm.
It's literally unique. And I realized that all these things, not so much the views, but also the experiences and the the the, the airports and the passengers, etc. I had to document it because it was so unique. And fortunately, a lot of colleagues, they really appreciated my photography, because they could finally show people at home as well what we were doing. And yeah, that especially the adventures in Afghanistan triggered me to take my photography to the next level. So I invested in better equipment, and yeah, it was really the trigger to yeah, to keep capturing the beautiful things from my
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah, and aside from the adventurousness of your blog posts and the photography of beautiful landscapes, I understand that you've also taken photos of some things that you consider unexplainable.
Yeah, at least one time I was able to capture something that I cannot explain. Three other times I've seen something that I cannot explain, but it happened so incredibly fast that I was unable to capture it. Yeah, but that's the added benefit of having a camera close by. That if you see something that you cannot explain, then you can document it as well. But it's fortunately,
Yeah,
as I said, only once that I was able to take a picture of it. Yeah.
yeah. I wanted to go through some of these unexplained sightings and just the sightings in general. And I believe there's four times you've seen something that could be categorized as unexplained, and one of those you have a photo of, which I'm also gonna link the website and the photos to the podcast wherever people are listening to or watching this. What do you feel would be the best way to go about telling the story of how you encountered these things? Because we could go chronologically, we could go based on just impact that it had on you. So I will leave it up to you how you want to tell this story, and we'll go through this however you see fit.
Sure. Yeah, it's the first time that I saw something that I still cannot explain was in 2005, and it was just actually, I think it was still in training when I was co-pilot on the F-50 turboprop. So I was fresh out of flying school basically. I didn't have much experience, let alone flying at night with a big airliner like that. And I remember we were flying over Germany, South Germany, and we were flying in between two cloud layers. And as a co-pilot, I was looking towards my captain, and all of a sudden, through his window, through his windshield, I see a really bright light. It's impossible to say how big it was, but I see a really bright light falling through the cloud layer above, vertically down, illuminating the cloud layer below before it descended through the cloud layer and disappearing like that. And it was bright white light. It wasn't pulsating. It didn't have any color. It was just a really bright light moving vertically down. And within 1 second, it was gone. And I remember that my instructor, or the captain, he said, "Wow, that was really strange." And I was completely shocked by it, because I had no clue what it could have been. But back then I thought, it's probably something weather related. Maybe it's kind of different kind of lightning that I haven't seen before. But now, only in retrospect, let's say 18 years later, I still haven't seen anything like it. And now I realize that it was quite anomalous. Uh, what we saw there over Germany. Interestingly enough, a couple of years later, I think it was in 2009, I was flying with a 737, Boeing 737, during day from Greece back to the Netherlands, and we were flying parallel to the Albanian Greek coastline over the Adriatic Sea. It was clear skies, no clouds whatsoever, and I see almost identical bright light falling vertically down and disappearing into the sea below. And my captain saw it as well. We were both really surprised. So twice I've seen pretty much the same thing: a really bright light falling, or maybe better said, moving vertically down and just gone in an instant. And of course, this happened so fast and it's completely unexpected. So I wasn't able to take any pictures of it. But yeah, I've seen it
Yeah.
twice now, and I still no clue what it could have been.
I want to go back to the one in Germany in 2005. You would categorize them as both falling lights, the one in 2005 and 2009. So like the first falling light was Germany 2005.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I prefer to say moving because it seems
Moving.
that, yeah, because the speed is much faster than you would expect for anything to free fall down.
Do you remember, or did you have a way of telling how far the cloud layers were apart from each other? So you're flying in between the clouds. There's cloud layer up here, cloud layer down here. Do you have an estimation of that?
Yeah, roughly a rough estimation would be about yeah 7,000 feet. So it was moving within 1 second, about 2 kilometers down.
Wow. And it seemed like it was, you said it was going much more than terminal velocity. So it wasn't just gravity. It was something that had some sort of system propelling it or moving it forward. And it was a big bright light with unclear margins. Like there was nothing that you could see, like any sort of shape to container or something like that. The light was just so bright it was obscuring all sorts of objects and shadows and things like that.
Yeah, it was just pure white light. It's also impossible to say how big it was because it's very difficult to judge distances and size because it was, as I said, it was just a light, but it appeared not to be too big. So it was a singular light, let's say the size of a basketball, or maybe the size of a car. I don't know, but there were no discernible features, nothing, and it didn't leave a trail either. So it wasn't something burning up that you would see maybe a smoke trail or some sparks flying up. It was just a single pure white bright light. That's it.
Was it the type of light that, like when you stare into the sun, you can only do it for a half a second and then your eyes start to burn and water? Was it something like that? Or when it passed your vision for a second, you saw it was bright, but it wasn't like it wasn't causing you any pain or anything like that?
Exactly. It was comparable to one of the bright planets that you sometimes see in the night sky,
Mm,
like a Venus or Jupiter. It's a very very bright spot, but it's not burning. It's not hurting your eyes. At least this is the closest to yeah to what it looked like for me.
are you able to tell if it made a break in the clouds? Like, could you see a path of it, like pulling the clouds? Like sometimes you'll see like a hole where things start to separate, or were you not able to see anything?
No, no. In this case, it was just, as I said, it was illuminating the clouds below as it fell through, and then
Yeah.
it was just gone. But it was also at night, so it was impossible to see if it left a hole or if it did anything with the clouds. Because I can imagine if it was emitting some sort of heat, it would have had a effect on the clouds, but it was impossible to see.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah. I wasn't even thinking about the heat. I guess it was far away enough where if it was giving off heat, it probably, you think it wouldn't have been a problem. It wouldn't have like melted the plane or anything like that.
Well, I'm pretty sure that whatever it was, I hope it will never hit the airplane because even if it's like a weather phenomena, like a ball lightning or something else, there's clearly a lot of energy involved. So anything that impacts the airplane, even if it's a lightning strike or anything else, it can potentially damage the airplane. So I'm really happy that whatever it was was kind of
Yeah.
far away. But it's one of my biggest fears that. You hit something with the airplane in the sky, and it can be just a bird. So even a small bird can do tremendous damage. So I'm pretty happy that it was far away. Yeah.
How many people are in the cockpit when you see it? Do you like? are you with someone else? Were you by yourself? What was kind of the environment for you when you sighted that thing, whatever
Uh,
it
in,
was?
in all of the times that I've seen something anomalous, I was always together with a colleague, and all of the times my colleague has also seen the same thing. Sometimes we're sitting in the cockpit with three pilots, especially on those really long flights. We have a third pilot, so we can extend the duty a bit more. So sometimes we're sitting in the cockpit with three guys, but 90% of the time, 95% of the time, just with two pilots.
Mm. And so you both see the same thing. I imagine if it was like you turn to the other person, I'm just saying I'm trying to imagine myself in that situation. You turn to someone and you say like, "Did you just fucking see that? Like, what the hell was that?" And the other person says, "Yeah, like I have no idea." Uh, what was that conversation like, and what were those moments immediately after? What did you talk about? What did you do? Did you call it in? Do you you're just like I don't know, just keep flying, obviously? Like what were those moments like the few minutes after you saw the falling light or the moving light?
Well, over Germany, it happened really fast, and my captain was just he said something like, "Oh wow," but then just shrugged his shoulders and just continued. So, especially with me having no experience, no flying experience back then, I decided, yeah, probably it's something normal. It should be okay. The second time I saw it, I had some more experience already, and my captain, she also saw the moving lights, and she was really surprised by this as well. And back then, I was doing the radio, so I decided to basically call the air traffic controller to ask if there was any military exercise going on. Because my first go-to answer is, well, it must be something military. It might be some missile test or whatever fancy weapon they're testing, and this could potentially be a risk for my airplane. So back then, it was in 2009, I said, so I had some more flying experience. I decided to call the air traffic controller and ask him if anything was up. And he immediately replied, really kind of bored. He said, "No, there's no airplane, there's no military traffic whatsoever. And by the way, just contact now the next controller because you're leaving my airspace." And that made me realize that there was no military exercise going on. There were no naval exercises whatsoever. And that left me clueless. And then, yeah, you look at each other and say, well, that's strange. Have you ever seen that? No, never seen it. Okay, well, whatever. And
Yeah.
from that moment on, there's no risk for the airplane anymore. Yeah, it must be weather related or something else. And you just continue with your day. Yeah.
So the second falling light, you call it in, you have communication, you check with the military operations, anything's going on in the area. The first falling light where you turn to your captain and he just shrugs it off and is like, that was, I don't know the exact, like that was weird or whatever he said. What do you think was different about the first situation that caused the sighting not to be called in, or at least just like this the sense of like holy shit just didn't seem that great, at least in terms of the other captain that was there? What do you think was different about that first situation, whether it's uh personality wise or whatever with the other captain, that made you not call it in for whatever reason or not make as big of a deal out of it?
Well, the captain's reaction was actually pretty much the same both the times, but the biggest difference was my experience and realizing that what I saw was simply not normal. So it was basically my flying experience made me more assertive in calling the air traffic controller, and I could have done that the first time as well, but I was just so inexperienced. As I said, I was barely feeling at home in the cockpit of the airplane, so everything was new. And yeah, if the captain shrugs his shoulders, yeah, well, it's probably okay. But later, the second time, I realized that this was more than just uh, uh, amazing. So yeah, I was just more assertive the second time.
Did you get a sense that the first captain had seen things like that before, which is why his reaction was so jaded, or is it just, you know, that's how pilots tend to react in those sorts of situations?
Yeah. Many pilots. Yeah, they don't really care. As long as there's no direct threat to the airplane or the safety of the airplane, Yeah, they just shrug their shoulders. Some other pilots they react differently. Some pilots they are much more proactive on it, and other pilots they literally say they don't want to know. And it's I actually recently had a really interesting conversation with one of my colleagues, and because they know I've been coming forward with my sightings now in a very down to earth way, and this colleague he never seen anything he couldn't explain, but he was really open and honest towards me. He said, "Well, I really hope I will never see anything because um, it scares him to bits to realize that there might be things that we cannot explain." So this could be how do you say this, like a barrier to actively contact air traffic control or make a report about it, because it's like some people just prefer not to see it, and if they see it, just shut their mind off
Mm.
and just ignore it. And I think this not only applies to UAP but also different things in society. But yeah, there's so many pilots, there's so many different personalities, and yeah, it's difficult to say if every pilot reacts like this or that. It depends on the person, depends on the experience, and depends on previous sightings as well, I guess.
Yeah, so you've had conversations with other pilots where they will say, even if I could know what it is, I'd rather not know the source of the things that I've seen that are unexplainable."
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And it's also
To,
interesting to see that, especially now since I came forward with my sightings, I've been approached by a lot of pilots who, for the first time, tell me their stories, which is very interesting. It's also a big honor to see that people that have been experiencing things are finally feeling the liberty and the security to share it with me, but also my direct colleagues. They've been coming forward with stuff they've seen. And in general, I would say that maybe 30 to 40% of the pilots have, at one point in their flying career, seen something they cannot readily identify. And I'm not saying it's UAP. It could be something strange weather related. It could be something really exotic military. I'm not excluding any of those possibilities. But roughly 30% of the pilots they have seen something, and they're kind of hesitant to come forward with it because of the stigma
yeah.
around UAP, and especially the previously called UFOs, because yeah, it's just a stigma that's preventing a lot of yeah, credible professionals from coming forward.
Yeah, if you whatever it is, if you have something where 30 to 40% of pilots are reporting seeing something unexplainable that, can not only be a threat to the, security in general, but like for the security of that flight, you're landing safely, protecting passengers, protecting your own life. I don't know how many thousands of flights that would be, 30 to 40%, combining all of those pilots' experiences. But, if it were anything else, if a pilot said that, 40% of the time there are clowns flying around the sky and they're fucking with our plane, the like FAA would immediately be like, well, we have to figure out like where these clowns are coming from, what they are, like who's sending these clowns, like why the fuck are there just like clowns in the sky? That's crazy. But like you're right, there is some sort of a stigma, a stickiness that is attached to people that are willing to talk about these types of things, like yourself, regardless of what the source is. And I've listened to past interviews. You've been very consistent on saying, you're open to whatever it is. You just want to know for the sake of safety and curiosity. So yeah, it is a weird thing surrounding that topic. People tend to tighten up and close off.
Yeah, well, by the way, it's not that pilots see unexplained things 30% of the time. It's just that, let's say, 30% of my direct colleagues have seen something once or twice in their entire career.
Ah, okay.
So it's a very inconsistent a phenomena, whatever it is. And we can talk about the other things that I've seen that are quite distinctly different than just the falling lights. But it's unpredictable, it's inconsistent, and it's very rare. But still, about 30% of the pilots they have seen something that they cannot explain during their career as a pilot, and that still warrants destigmatization, because even if it just happens once, if there's a safety issue involved, we have to take it serious. And the same with the incident I told you about with the near collision over Africa. This is something very practical that we have to prevent, and that's why airplanes nowadays, they have these TCAS systems to prevent this from happening. Of course, they have to switch it on, but aviation is all about safety, and there have been so many accidents in the past, and we constantly learn about it. We have these reconstructions of what happened, and we have this cockpit voice recorder, etc. And yeah, I think the same approach has to be applied to the UAP phenomena, even if it just happened once, even if there's maybe one accident that could lead to a decrease in safety. It has to be taken serious, and yeah, I think that's the only approach that's helpful.
Yeah, and you said the one in February 2009 with the moving light, very similar, except that one went down towards the ocean.
Yeah.
Was there, do you remember seeing any indication that there was movement? Like, could you even tell if there's movement in the water or waves or anything like that? Or you just saw a ball of light disappear once it hit the ocean?
Yeah, it was too far away to see any splash, physical splash. It was too far away to see anything happening on the ocean surface. I think it was around 20 kilometers away from us, so it was quite far away. But from my perspective, the light just moved into the ocean and it was gone. It doesn't mean anything because it was so far away. It could have maybe caused some ripples or steam or whatever it was, but it was just too far away for us to see.
Yeah, the only thing I've seen videos of that I could ever describe as a ball of light would be a ball of lightning, but based on what I've seen, those move very slow. Like they literally just kind of like move through the air like this, and it looks very strange. But yeah, I've never seen or heard anything that was moving that fast that could move that altitude in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and especially 2009 when we were flying there over the Adriatic Sea, there was no clouds, there was no buildup, there was no electrical storm, no thunderstorm, and I think is I've been thinking about it a lot since. If there was some sort of a ball lightning, it would make more sense to be present if there's a lot of thunderstorms around or a lot of electromagnetical discharge, etc. But it was just clear skies, blue skies, and uh, I have no clue how a ball lightning could form in clear skies, and especially move that fast. But then again, it could be a weather phenomenon that's just simply not understood. But for me, they stand out as um, yeah, strange things that I still cannot explain.
What about a meteor or something burning up in the atmosphere? Do you think it could be anything like that? Something coming from space,
Um, I've
like an
seen
inanimate
thousands.
object?
Yeah, I've seen thousands and thousands of meteors burning up in the atmosphere, and it's always very spectacular. They pretty much always move in a diagonal line, burning up through the atmosphere. Um, I'm not 100% sure if a meteor could actually fall vertically down. It seems unlikely to me, but I guess it could happen. The biggest issue I have with the hypothesis of being a meteor is that meteors always burn up. They either leave a smoke trail. Some of the meteors they actually make it down to the surface of the Earth. I've seen it once, twice as well. Very spectacular, but they leave a smoke trail behind, and they don't glow white as I've seen them glowing. In this case, the two vertically moving lights they were going extremely fast, but they didn't leave any smoke trail. There was nothing burning. There was
Mm.
no. Yeah, it seemed completely different than all the thousands of meteors I've seen so far. So I cannot dismiss it completely, but for me, it's not a satisfactory explanation for these vertically moving lights.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you about the other sightings. I just want to run to the bathroom real quick, and I'll be right back.
Sure.
So the 2005 and the 2009, you would both categorize as moving light. What is the next sighting that would be good to get into after those?
The other two sightings were completely different in nature, but both equally interesting. Very different. Let's see, the other sighting I had was in 2005. It was also still relatively inexperienced as a pilot. But it happened when we were flying for Olympic Airways or Olympic Airlines, big Greek airline based out of Athens. And we were flying with these turboprop airplanes to all these little islands everywhere. It was a lot of fun flying. And I was flying together with my colleague, and I think we landed at the airport of Mykonos, one of those really small airports with isolated islands with a small runway. And it's just a small runway with on one end on one side the terminal, and after landing we had to make a 180-degree turn on the runway and taxiing back. And that night we were flying. Well, I guess it must have been around 10 in the evening or so. We landed, and the moment we
That's
were
when.
turning the air,
Sorry. I was just gonna say that's when everyone in Mykonos wakes up from their nap to go out and party. I've been there a couple times. 10 p.m.
yeah, yeah. Well, maybe it's related to the thing we've seen there, but
Yeah.
no, it's so what happened? So we were making the 180-degree turn, and the cockpit was facing due north, and all of a sudden, and my captain saw it as well. We see in the night sky, it was there were no clouds, which is all the stars. We see a really bright light appearing. It was almost the same appearance as one of those falling lights I've seen before. It looks like a very bright planet, as I said before, like Mars or Venus you sometimes see in the sky. But in this case, the light appeared, it moved, disappeared, reappeared again a little bit further down towards the east. This happened about 4 times. It made a stuttering motion, like it was the engine was cranking up, and it was making 4 times a stuttering, appearing, and reappearing motion. And all of a sudden, it disappeared again. It reappeared quite a bit further, and it just shot off due east with incredible speed. And there was no acceleration; it was just instant speed, gone. And I remember that my captain was seeing it as well. Said, "Whoa, what the heck is that?" But yeah, then again, he's still busy with steering the airplane, and we went to the terminal. And that night, we knew that the carrier group, the U.S. carrier group with the USS Theodore Roosevelt, was passing by in the Mediterranean Sea, a bit further south. We don't know the exact location of these carrier groups, but because that's classified. But they closed down whole parts of the airspace to make sure that there's no intruders getting too close to these naval ships. And in the flight preparation that day, we knew that the carrier group was passing by. So it basically stated that for the entire night, this was airspace, the closed airspace or off limits for us. And the moment we saw these lights shooting down or stuttering and shooting off, for a long time I thought, well, this is probably related. Maybe it's some high-tech military toys, or maybe this is some missile being launched. But I've always wondered what it was, because especially the instant speed. I was about to say acceleration, but it wasn't even acceleration. It was instant speed. That was so incredibly fast. It really made me wonder if there's any high-tech equipment that can do that. Not just having the energy to accelerate to such incredible speed, but also the materials to withstand that kind of speed and acceleration. It was mind-blowing. And it was only in later years that after I've been reading some books about UAP, etc., that this stuttering motion and instant speed from lights in the sky had been observed, especially around nuclear missile sites and also nuclear installations. And the moment I read those reports, dating back from the 50s all the way up to now, they described exactly what we saw that night over Mykonos, with the carrier group passing by quite close. So for me, this is an indication that there is possibly a correlation with this nuclear powered ship, and maybe they had some nuclear weapons on board as well. And this really strange light that we saw in the sky, and I've never seen anything remotely since. Nothing.
Yeah, I've heard stories of, and I've read a couple accounts. It may have been the same or probably similar accounts of people who work at nuclear plants that report missiles being shut down and disarmed out of nowhere without any warning. It's not part of the system. It's not a superior coming in and shutting down a missile. It's just like literally it just deactivates and then it comes back online. So it's whatever it is. Like there have been some, like you said, consistently reported UAP activities around nuclear sites that correlate sometimes with the not that it's causing, but like a correlation with the shutting down of the weapons that are present at that facility.
Yeah, definitely. And have you read the book UFOs and Nukes from Robert Hastings?
I haven't, but it's on my list.
Oh, it's quite a big book, about 500 or 600 pages, but it's excellent work. And basically, he describes all the incidents that are known, at least the known incidents that have happened since the earliest nuclear test, even the radiation fallout, where some strange lights have been seen over the United States, all the way up to present day with incidents happening. In the UK at nuclear armed bases, in Germany, and basically all over the world. And his work, UFOs and Nukes, it's absolutely worth reading. And apologies. In that book, I actually read some accounts of these stuttering lights and also vertically moving lights that describe exactly what I've seen as well. And this was really a pleasant surprise to see that I'm not making things up. Of course, I know I'm not making things up, but it was like a confirmation that what I've seen is really something anomalous.
Yeah. So the lights that you saw on the, or a single light that you saw on the runway in Mykonos, did it make a shape with where it was lighting up? Like, was it the four corners of a square? Was it just like making a straight line and then it went off? Was there any shape to it, like a pattern?
No, it was exactly the same as the falling lights. It was just a single bright light, and it didn't have any shape. It didn't leave any smoke. It didn't leave any sparks or glow, whatever. It was just a solid, defined light, very much like a planet, a bright planet. And as it shut off, it didn't leave any traces. It didn't leave any glow or smoke. It just moved extremely fast, and that was it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
but when it shut off, so it shut off a few times and it came back on.
Yeah, so it was
And
like
before,
stuttering movement. Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, that's what I mean. Like with the stuttering, if you connected those dots of stuttering, did it make a shape? Was it a straight line? Was it a square, an arc, anything like that that you could
No,
tell?
it just moved in one single line. So I'm pretty sure that it was the same light that moved, appeared, reappeared, moved, etc. It was just one single light that moved and was not part of a bigger object or whatever it was. But then again, it was the middle of the night. It If there was, let's say, a dark um, machine behind it, it was impossible to say or to see
Hmm.
actually as well. But I'm pretty sure it was just one single light.
Yeah, and it would also would it also be impossible to tell since it's at night if there was four separate lights and they were just staying in the same motion and they were turning on. So like when one turned on, the other one went dark, and then when it went away, oh, maybe only one light turned on and it was a streak. Like I'm guessing it would have been hard to tell if it was something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it could be as well. Then again, the fact that it made this stuttering movement and then this single light, whatever it was, the single light shot off at incredible speed, at least gave the impression that it was just one single object or light, whatever,
Hmm.
that was moving all the time. But it could be that it was a light in a sequence. Then again, yeah, it was just my impression that it was the same object, solid, defined light, stuttering and shooting off. But then again,
So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and so when you and the captain see the same thing, what do you do from there? Do you have communication with the controllers? Do you kind of just shrug it off? Do you personally record it? Like what's the reporting process that you went through for that one?
Well, nothing actually. Both of us, we saw it. We were really surprised. But our first answer, our first explanation was actually, yeah, well, it's probably related to the U.S. Naval group passing by. At that moment, we were only talking over the radio with the tower controller of Mykonos, and that guy is basically only regulating the traffic on his runway. So if I tell him, well, I see a strange light in the sky, well, he will probably say, well, yeah, I'm happy for you. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing he can do about it. And let's say if there would have been a threat to flight safety, we can always write those reports. And this is something that every airline nowadays has in place. It's a very solid safety system where all the pilots can report potential hazards that we encounter. So let's say even if I have a bird strike, if I see that the bird has hit my airplane, I can write a report about it, and they can try to improve flight safety. But in this case, the light we saw, it was probably very high, very far away. It didn't pose any threat to us. So yeah, there is no way that I can or should report any of these sightings. So yeah, most of these sightings they are literally left unnoticed. Many pilots they will never report anything like that. It's only that I realized in retrospect that some of the things that I've seen are actually kind of anomalous. But I guess many pilots they've seen stuff, no clue what to do with it, and it's being left untold.
How many seconds, again, like you weren't tracking it, so there's no way to know the exact amount, but if you had to give an estimate of how long it stayed in your field of vision when it started to take off, that light, is it, less than 0.1 seconds? Is it half a second? Like how blink of an eye? How would you estimate that?
Well, I think the total sighting, including the little stuttering and the shooting, or let's say the acceleration or the moving away, was about 3 seconds. So that's from the moment we started seeing it up to the moment it disappeared from view. But the moment it started shooting off or moving away, it was yeah, zero point 0.2 seconds. It
Yeah.
was insane. Yeah, it was
So
almost instantaneous.
how many stutters was it before it took off? Was it
Four of them.
four? So it's kind of
Yeah,
like a slower, like bang, 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 and then just like after the fourth one, it just shot like in a line.
yeah. It was like 1, 2, 3, 4. It was gone just like that. Yeah, and of course I didn't make the sounds because I'm making this myself, but it was like
Yeah.
unlike anything I've ever seen before. And I've seen a lot of thunderstorms up close or even inside. I've seen some really strange electromagnetical things happening with the airplane windows the moment we were flying in a storm. I've seen, especially in Afghanistan, I've seen a lot of missiles and rockets and bullets, etc. I know what it looks like, and this I cannot even fathom an explanation for what we've seen.
Hmm.
So for a long time, it was always in the back of my mind, and it's only well since let's say 2 years since I've been reading up on the subject after I saw the interviews with Commander David Fravor and Ryan Graves, etc., that I realized that some of the stuff that I've seen actually sounds pretty much like what they've seen as well. So that's how my sightings finally dawned to me. Oh, sorry, how it dawned to me that my sightings could be something
Yeah.
anomalous.
So much faster than any, like you said, missile weapon that you've seen shoot or anything burning up in the atmosphere that could be identified as a meteor or anything like that. Just that
Yeah,
that motion that it made just put those other things to shame. It was just so much faster than what
yeah,
you've
because
seen.
yeah, because I've seen so many shooting stars, and they pretty much always move with the same speed. I've seen some rocket debris burning up in the atmosphere, which is going relatively slow at about the same speed as the ISS or satellites you sometimes see in the sky. And I've seen the ISS, I've seen satellites, etc. I've seen them millions of times. They always move in the same speed because the orbital speed around the planet is a function of the distance towards the Earth. So let's say everything in low Earth orbit between 350 and let's say 600 kilometers altitude, which is roughly the size that the ISS is moving, and all the satellites, you can just see them moving all in the same speed. And in this case, the acceleration that object that moved so fast, it didn't look anything like a meteor or the ISS or satellites or anything. Just incredible.
Is there any communication that you could have with the military where you could call someone and say, "Hey, I'm not asking you to declassify any information, but I see you've closed off the airspace. We just saw this. Can you tell me, you know, should I worry about this or should I not?" And then the guy on the other line could just be like, "Don't worry about it." And you'd be like, "Okay, it's a military thing." Or can you not uh, pick up the phone and do something like that, make that call?
Interesting. First of all, I wouldn't know who to call because let's say in this case you have a U.S. Naval carrier going by, so that should be the American military, and I'm flying over Greece. So I'm really doubtful if I could call the Greek military, and I'm really doubtful if the Americans will ever admit to a random Dutch guy that they have some classified high-tech stuff flying around. So I think
True.
that's quite unlikely. But it's interesting because actually the fourth sighting, I'm not sure if you're ready for the fourth sighting already.
Yeah,
I did,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Let's do that.
By the way, do you mind if we take a short break because I have to close one of the curtains before the light is falling directly on the camera? So
Of course.
I don't want to
Yeah, yeah.
blind you
No.
completely.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I'll be back in a minute. Yeah, so talking about the military, that's an interesting one because I think many times when pilots see lights or objects moving in the sky, it could be military related, maybe even high tech, super secret tech. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of sightings from UAP could be mundane military projects. But then again, as I said, who to contact, and then again, why would the military even disclose to some random pilots that they are actually playing around in the airspace with incredible machinery? So yeah,
Yeah, I just
interesting.
wanted to say one quick thing before we get into the fourth sighting. I've been going through more and more accounts and thinking more and more about UAP and the connection with the military. Up until the last, you know, 40, 50 years or so, we are so used to going through history as a planet, as a connection of nations, making technological advancements at relatively the same speed. There are obviously isolated cases of people being apart from mainstream society, and so therefore they don't get the same technological advancements. But for the most part, there's a lot of the globe that will make certain advancements at around relatively the same time, whether it's during that century or during the same decade with things like internet or farming, whatever it is. And now we live in a time where there's so much military secrecy and so much divide between nations and so many high level people that are smart enough to create new technologies that aren't communicating with each other. And I used to think that it would be impossible for another nation to have something so high level, especially coming from the U.S. My ego is already big enough where I'm like, we're the number one country in the world. No one can fucking make something that's better than anything ever built in the United States. Like if there was, we'd know about it. But like just like having that level of secrecy and all these barriers and just having people up the chain of command where you have a very small amount of individuals that are in control of essentially the superhuman technology with AI, with propulsion, with all of these things that would probably blow our minds if we went in a room and someone demonstrated it. I don't think it's that far beyond the realm of a possibility where there may be a country out there that has just cracked the code maybe a decade or two before the rest of the world has. And because we don't live in a world where those sort of secrets are encouraged and we're not naturally coming across technological innovations and sailing across the world and being like, look what I can do. Like, let's trade things. Like you figure out a secret and you keep it from the other countries. I am also open to that possibility. So I thought that would be a good thing to say, that you can't really rule any sort of military or high level technologically advanced source of even a private company that's hired contractors that work in that sort of space that just aren't willing to share anything with anyone because, again, we live in a world that's shrouded in technological secrecy.
Definitely. The only issue that comes to mind, because I've been contemplating about these things as well. The only issue I can find with this, let's say, solution to the UAP phenomena or the things that I've seen is that these sightings and pretty similar sightings of moving lights and incredibly fast moving, accelerating lights are being given already since the Second World War. It started with these Foo Fighters, where a lot of files are still being held classified actually about what pilots seen and sometimes interacted with all over the world, not just the European theater, but also over the Pacific. And already since the 40s, 50s, these lights, these incredibly fast-moving, accelerating, and bizarre phenomena in the sky, have been relatively consistently seen and observed since, well, let's say 80 years ago. And if, let's say, if the US or any other nation would have um, invented some sort of technology or maybe even materials that could withstand that kind of acceleration, or that could actually exhibit those kind of things that we've seen right now, it's it could not have been kept secret for 80 years, almost 100 years now, and it would probably have um, been implemented in different fields in society as well. So whatever it is, it's showing pretty much the same bizarre movements and characteristics for as I said, almost 100 years. So that pretty much excludes a single country in the world to have developed that kind of technology and just play around with it. And even if they did, because I agree with you, it's a lot of these sightings can probably be explained with some military toys and military hardware. Um, why would they exhibit it in such a public space like European airspace, where I've seen these things, or for example the Phoenix lights, where tens of thousands of people have seen these huge ships or things passing by? Doesn't make any sense. Let's say if there's another nation besides the US, let's say China or the Soviet Union, why would they exhibit those high tech fancy toys in front of the entire Western world? It doesn't make much sense. But then again, I could be missing a few points here as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's a great point, that these sightings have been going on since at least the 40s and 50s. So it's almost impossible that a country would have been keeping that high a level of technology secret for that long. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it seems like such a dumb thing to do, to test out technology in a public space. But then again, you do have high level weapons testing out in the open. Also, it's well known that other countries, there are multiple countries that have the ability to test out nuclear weapons, or whatever there is today. I'm not sure like what the most advanced, most destructive weapon is, but like there are these very public testings all the time, and people aren't worried about covering up. But if you have a technology that no one else has, it would be pretty stupid to test it out in front of the rest of the world, where people can see it and make reports and analyze it, and start to break it down technologically. I mean, unless if the leader of that country was like, trolling, that's the only thing I could think of. Like, if they just wanted to like stunt on other world leaders and be like, we have this, like, you're probably going to think it's, you don't even know what the source is, because you're not even close to that. But that, again, that's just a, stupid theory.
Yeah, yeah, I've been thinking about it as well. And then again, if you have this technology that's so extremely advanced and so far ahead of your rival, yeah, teasing would be part of the geopolitical game. But then again, why would you inspire them to maybe look for new physics or new ways of propulsion? Let's say if it was the Soviet Union or maybe even North Korea, whatever, it doesn't matter. If you have this ultimately advanced technology, why would you tease the Americans with it? Because you know that there's the budget for coming up with new materials and weapons in the US is far exceeding any other country. So why would you even tease them to come up with new toys? I don't know. I don't know. Uh, it
Yeah,
still wouldn't
the best
surprise me.
plan of attack, the
Yeah,
best plan of attack is surprise. So
yeah.
that yeah, it wouldn't really make sense to stunt out in the open like that. I don't want to sidetrack us too much with my theoretical tangents, so I'll let you go into the fourth UAP sighting.
Yeah, that's how we started with the military stuff. Because the fourth sighting, I actually did call the military air traffic controller, but I will first give you the background of the fourth time. This was back in 2010. I was flying the 737, as a co-pilot, and we were flying in the evening, late evening, from Amsterdam to in the Netherlands to the southern part of Spain. And we were just the sun had already set, and you could still see the horizon and some clouds below. And basically, the whole sky was turning from yellow to orange to dark blue, and there was not much cloud activity. There was some lower clouds far below, and we were crossing into Spanish airspace over the Pyrenees, and we still had roughly 55 minutes or 1 hour of flight to go. And my colleague, a former military pilot, a very experienced, really down to earth guy, he's asking me if I see the same object straight ahead and what I think it is. So I don't know what I was doing. I was probably doing the flight plan or a field check. And I look out, and straight ahead, really straight ahead of our airplane, I see a little dot. It was like it's very hard to say what it looked like or how far it was, but it was just a solid object, backlit, which was extremely far away and extremely high. It was, let's say, the size, sorry, the shape of a cigar, or yeah, let's say cigar shaped. And I was looking at it, and I realized it was really weird because we were on a direct course after entering Spain. The air traffic controller cleared us on a direct course all the way to the runway of Malaga. So that means we left the airways and there was no other traffic basically around us. On top of that, we were flying very high. We were flying at 41,000 feet, which is much higher than most commercial
Mm.
airplanes are flying. And whatever it was much higher than we were flying. And estimated, let's say 60, 70, 80,000 feet, which doesn't make any
Wow.
sense because there's hardly any traffic in the world that can fly that high, let alone yeah, large commercial airplanes. So we were really wondering what we were looking at, and it stayed ahead of us, exactly ahead of us, completely stationary. So meaning it didn't move relative to our airplane. It didn't move vertically. It didn't change shape. So we were flying close to the speed of sound all the way to the south. Whatever it was, it didn't get bigger or smaller. And that really made us wonder what it was. So first action was calling the air traffic controller, the Madrid air traffic controller. He's basically taking care of the upper airspace in Spain, and he was really surprised. He said, "No, there's absolutely no traffic, known traffic ahead of you guys. So what do you see?" So I told him, "Well, there's something flying ahead of us. It looks quite big, and we were just wondering what it was because out of curiosity." And about 2 minutes later, he comes back to me over the radio. He says. Um, Military air traffic control wants to know about your sighting as well. Can you please contact them on this and this frequency? So I tuned in the other frequency, and I was talking directly with the military air traffic control, the Spanish military air traffic controller. And this guy was really interested. He wanted to hear everything that we saw, and he also confirmed that they didn't have anything, no known traffic whatsoever over Spain on their radar. A military air traffic control, they have a primary radar, which is basically sending out radar signals and showing everything solid in the airspace, contrary to commercial radars. But he said, no, there's no traffic ahead of you, and there's no weather balloons because apparently they track weather balloon activity as well. And yeah, he was really curious to see what we saw. So that was really interesting to see. And then after about 55 minutes of flying, we were finally getting close to Malaga, all the way the south of Spain. And we made a left turn and we descended into the clouds. And all the time, I still saw the same object in the same geographical position. And it must have been by that time over Africa, somewhere over Africa. And it didn't change size, shape, or whatsoever. And it just stayed there in the sky. And it was the most curious thing I've ever seen. And this is the first time, also the only time, unfortunately, I was able to take a picture of it. And I'm the first to admit it's a completely underwhelming picture because basically you see a sky with a really small dot. But in the context of us seeing it for over an hour and the fact that we were flying already very high and it must have been extremely high in the atmosphere, it makes it strange, absolutely strange.
What was the tone of the military guy that you were speaking to during this conversation? Was he surprised, overwhelmed? Was he nonchalant? What did it feel like talking to him or
It
her,
sounded like
whoever
he
it
was.
was?
It was a him. It was. He sounded very proactive, very curious, and very businesslike. He didn't ridicule anything. He didn't laugh about it. But he was absolutely curious to find out what we were seeing, and it was Yeah, professional. Actually, in the last couple of years, I've seen some other things burning up in the atmosphere as well, and I've called air traffic control to ask if something was happening. Later on, we found out it was just very mundane, something very simple that was burning up. But the few times that I've called air traffic control and asked them if there was any military activity, they just shrugged it off. They were completely uninterested, and that's the biggest thing in retrospect that surprised me with the object over Spain. That both the civil and the military air traffic controller were really professional, and they didn't ridicule it. They believed us, and they just wanted to know what we've been seeing.
So it wasn't changing shape. It stayed that cigar shape the whole time you saw it for about the hour. Wasn't seemingly changing elevation, staying pretty much at the same spot. Is there a possibility that it could have been so far away that maybe it wasn't tracking you, but you just weren't getting close enough to change the shape of it?
Yeah, that's exactly. It could be two things. It was either ahead of us in a fixed distance, is constantly moving together with us, basically tracking us. That could have explained the fact that it didn't change shape or size. But it seems very unlikely because we were on a direct course, and yeah, besides that, it doesn't make any sense if something just stays ahead of us for over an hour. Or the second option is that it was so far away, so incredibly far away, that the relative change in distance from us and the object was just negligible. Then again, if it was this second option, if it was an object that was extremely far away, it must have been both huge. I mean, we're talking about massive size and extremely high. We're talking about really the upper edges of the atmosphere, which is something that's weird. But then again, nothing really makes sense. I just don't know what it could have been. Yeah, I'm just completely clueless about anything.
Yeah. Whatever the source of it is, if something is staying the same shape, size, and altitude for a long period of time, and let's assume it's not the further away option where it's it's maintaining the same exact distance between itself and the plane, could you is that an something that could happen incidentally, or is that indicative of a system that has tracking capabilities, whatever the source of it is, like something that could stay on a target exactly for 1 hour straight?
Well, it's yeah, I guess it could be, especially since a lot of airplanes are flying across tracks or airways. If you know the airways, you can just follow the same airway, and especially if you analyze a lot of traffic over time, you could basically see what kind of routes are normally being flown by airplanes. So in that case, you could track something, maybe even a drone or something could basically track it. This case, we were flying on a direct route, so that was a pretty random route. That's not a known route. And then again, if you track something, it would make more sense to me to fly behind it. And the altitude doesn't really make any sense. I guess if it would have been something, let's say a drone or anything else that would track us, that would fly together with us in the same distance or same bearing, it wouldn't fly that high. I would expect something to fly at the same altitude or lower. But then again, nothing really makes sense on what we saw there. So I've no clue. It could be. It could be.
Yeah, I know military pilots obviously have a very advanced tracking system to work with. What are the type of systems or equipment that you have in the plane that would be able to track objects that are outside of the plane?
Well, first of all, we talked about this TCAS system before. This is
TCAS.
this traffic collision avoidance system that every big airliner has, and we see on our navigation display all the traffic around us, and this goes up to a range of around 80 nautical miles, 80. So that's around 150 kilometers all around us. We can basically see all the commercial traffic, sometimes even military traffic, within an altitude block. In this case, nothing showed up on TCAS, so whatever it was not carrying a transponder, and it was not flying within, let's say, 80 miles. So it's kind of inconclusive. And the other stuff that we have on board is a weather radar, and it's basically continuously sending out radar signals, bouncing off hopefully clouds and rain. But it's optimized for sensing weather. So sometimes, if you're really lucky, the weather radar can pick up some other traffic as well. You can see a big reflection on the navigation display coinciding with the TCAS signal. Then you realize that the radar is just picking up the signals that are
Mm,
bouncing off the other airplane. But there's no guarantee that the radar signals will bounce off, because the weather radar, as I said, it's made for detecting weather. So as commercial traffic, we have no way of tracking other objects. I guess
mm,
military airplanes like fighter jets, etc., they probably have more sophisticated tracking systems to lock on, etc. But if I'm not mistaken, all of those tracking systems are facing forward, including forward-looking infrared and radar, you name it, maybe even visual acquisition apparatus. But it's all facing forward, or let's say in a range of about 180 degrees around, but not facing backwards. So yeah, I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe it's best to ask a military pilot these kind of details, because I've no, I don't think it was tracking us, but then again, I don't know.
Yeah.
Could,
So I see on your website you have the fourth sighting in Spain labeled under investigation. Are you able to talk about the progress of that investigation and exactly what about the photo that you took is being investigated? Which, by the way, I'm going to link it in the podcast description, and I'll also throw it up on the screen when when we just spoke about it, so people will have an idea.
yeah, sure. Yeah, and as I said before, it's completely underwhelming, the picture. So a lot of people are criticizing me for taking a blurry picture, but it's not so much about the picture; it's about the whole context of seeing something. So this is a bit of uh, uh, a warning for the people who hope to see a UFO. Yeah, but I sent in the picture to IPACO, which is a French organization. Actually, I took two pictures within 2 minutes or so, which are completely identical, but at least they can analyze both of the pictures, and they already concluded at least that the pictures are genuine. They're not altered or photoshopped or tricked with in any possible way. So far, they're very busy, and I think they have a lot of pictures they're working on right now. But the last I heard is that they confirmed, well, as I said, first of all, it's a genuine photo, and second of all, there seems to be no visible form of propulsion or engines, etc. It just seems to be a solid object, and yeah, so far it's not weather related as well. That's also what they confirmed, and they're going to try and find the satellite pictures of the Spanish Peninsula with all the clouds, so they can see if it's possibly weather related. But they basically already said no, it's not a cloud, it's not um, anything that is readily explainable. So I'm just waiting for the final analysis. And by the way, if someone or a professional organization also wants to analyze these images, I'm absolutely open for that, because I think it's important to have as many specialists and analysis
Yeah.
yeah, being done on such photos.
I'm sure you thought about this, but like, would it be possible to rig a camera on the outside of a plane to take photos every few seconds on a commercial flight or something without jeopardizing the safety of the passengers and the safety of the vehicle, just to have something in front and behind totally for observational purposes, and just to have something on the plane to record the flights, and then once you're done with it you could just wipe it and say, there's nothing there, and just keep refilling it with each flight. Is that a possibility, or would an airline never go for that?
Well, it's a practical possibility. I mean, you could actually get a GoPro and put it in the window in the cockpit, so it doesn't interfere with the flight, etc. Many airlines, like the big airlines like the A380, etc., they have these cameras for entertainment purposes, so people can look in their in-flight entertainment system to what's happening in front of the airplane or behind the airplane. So technically, it's possible. But airlines, they don't want to spend any money if they don't have to spend it. So what would be the risk and benefits for an airline? In this case, I think a camera, it would cost a lot of money. It would require extra maintenance, certification by the manufacturer, etc. And this is costing a lot of money. Yeah, for what? As I said, there's only maybe 30% of the pilots who once or twice saw something during their entire career. Is it justifiable to spend millions on every airplane just to install a camera? I don't think you will convince any airline to do so. But then again, pilots like me and more pilots are carrying a GoPro with them or other equipment. That might increase the chance of capturing a UAP. But I think it's quite unlikely that airlines will just randomly install cameras and spend a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if a CEO of major airline is listening to this, if you charged me $5 extra on a ticket and it said UAP research and discovery expenses, I would have no problem with that. I suspect that there are a ton of other people that, if you airline fees are obviously already pretty high. If you added on an extra few bucks to and you said, this is what it's for in the receipt, whatever prints out, the confirmation that you get, I'd be like, that's pretty fucking cool. Like, whatever, go for it.
Yeah. Well, who knows? You can propose it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So what sparked you wanting to come forward with your UAP sightings?
Well, as I said, the first time I started to take the subject serious was after I read the New York Times article in 2017. But it didn't really trigger anything in me. It was just interesting and it was yeah, fascinating. And afterwards, I think I only saw the interview with Commander David Fravor. He's giving a couple of interviews, and his colleagues. Ryan Dietrich, I think, and later on Ryan Graves. I only saw those interviews in 2020, which was actually kind of late. I came to the party quite late, but it was only then that I realized that what they've been seeing was genuine, and they came across as trustworthy. And it's also at that moment I realized that the four sightings we just discussed that I've seen were quite interesting in that light. And I realized that there might be happening more in the skies than we realized. As I said before, with the light over Greece, we first thought it must have been something military, which is always the go-to answer for something we cannot explain. But now these military pilots were coming forward, and that means that even the military pilots are sometimes wondering what they see in the sky. So after that interview, I started reading up more about the UAP topic and UFOs, basically to debunk it, because I thought, you know what, this should be something so simple and I can easily debunk it. Especially with my experience as a pilot, I can rule out what it is and what it isn't. And it's only then that I stumbled upon many sightings that were quite similar to mine, and how should I put it? I realize more and more that the stigma around this whole topic is just so incredibly strong. It requires a couple of individuals to come forward with their sightings and basically approach the whole topic in a down to earth way. Just get rid of the stigma. And the moment that the stigma is disappearing, I'm pretty sure that more and more pilots, but maybe also military personnel, air traffic controllers, etc., will come forward with their own experiences. But someone has to open up that gate. And I think it was in an interview with Mr. Louis Elizondo. I think it was with Kurt Jamongo from Theories of Everything. And I believe Mr. Elizondo said a couple of times that he was hoping that not just military pilots would come forward, but also civilian pilots, etc. And that's the moment I realized that my sightings might actually be very important. And I don't care what it was, what I've seen. It might be something military or maybe something very mundane that we can explain tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. That's fine by me. But at least I can come forward with my sightings and just step by step get rid of the stigma. So yeah, I was really wondering what channel or what what way of discussing this topic would work best. And in the end, I got in touch with Vinny Adams from Disclosure Team, and I chatted with him a couple of times. And I said, I've seen these and these things. Would it be interesting for you to do an interview? Because as I said, my picture of Spain, of this Spanish object, is completely underwhelming, and the rest is only anecdotal. So I have no clue if it's of any use. And basically, we discussed it, and he said, "Yeah, please do, because it shows that even if it's just anecdotal evidence, it's still important to open up about the topic." So that's how we started. And after the interview with Disclosure Team, it just opened up the floodgates, and I received so many emails. And as I said before, so many pilots, both direct colleagues of mine and people I've never met before, they approach me with their own sightings. Some of them, which are really, really impressive. They're talking about physical objects, just sometimes flying close to the cockpit or next to the airplane. So many pilots came forward with their own experiences to me, and it shows that a lot of stuff is happening and being observed, but we have to get rid of the stigma. Long story short.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have nothing left to lose. I'm not making things up. I don't have any security clearances. I just do my job. And in the past, I've seen some stuff I cannot explain. So that's it.
Yeah, I had a similar path in terms of UAP interest. I've never had a personal sighting. Obviously, I'm not a pilot. I don't have those sort of credentials. But like seeing the 2017 article in the New York Times, where the Pentagon admitted to funding a program to investigate UAPs. They published the video officially of the gimbal that had been out there. I saw it and it stayed in the back of my mind, but I didn't dive into it with any sort of open curiosity. And then when I saw guys like David Fravor, a highly trained military pilot, Ryan Graves going on Joe Rogan podcast, Lex Friedman, and having these highly trained personnel dispassionately discuss logical or not logical interactions, but like in a logical way, this is what I saw, this is what I'm trained to observe, these are the things that lie outside the box of what I consider explainable, and here's why. Whatever the source is, there wasn't an air of quackery about it like so many conversations in the UAP UFO space, where there's there's so much mixing of egos and wanting for attention and wanting to top stories and wanting to contribute to the experience, and a lot of people that are coming at it out of bad faith or don't have the best mental capacity, or just there's a lot of mixing up in it. But then once I saw these podcasts start to come out with military pilots, and I also listened to and watched the conversation that you had with Ryan Graves on his podcast, which was an exceptional podcast. I encourage people to check that out as well. That changed the way that I thought about it, where I go, okay, you have to have a certain level of filter of intelligence, of mental capacity, of reflex it, like physical capabilities, in order to even get in the seat of an airplane. And if multiple people are experiencing similar things that have these capacities, then it is something to me that seems more than worth exploring, just to figure out exactly what it is, because it could be a safety hazard for public health. It could be a safety hazard for aviation, passengers, pilots, people who are exploring the sky. Like if you don't know what it is, the unknown is the scariest thing. So why not try to figure out the source of these things and work together and collaborate and open the conversation? So, by no means am I comparing what I've experienced to what you've experienced, because there really is no comparison. But just in terms of the article coming out and then seeing the podcast, I kind of had a similar light bulb moment of, oh shit, like these guys are talking about it, I should probably pay more attention to this and dive into this.
I'm really happy to hear that, because I think that's also so important. Why for example, pilots or professionals are coming forward. It's not that we are extra trustworthy because I happen to be a pilot. It's not that military pilots are, by definition, always truthful. But the point is, what they call credible observers is that it's coming from people who are trained to look out of their window. And in case of military pilots, to use their tracking equipment like radar, etc., that are trained to recognize airplanes at a distance. And for me, as a commercial pilot, I'm trained to look out of my window uh, to identify potential hazards, weather-wise, traffic-wise, etc. And I have this, let's say, built-in filter, especially with experience, to know when something is off outside. And this is making our observations, especially the UAP observations, interesting because we have filtered out already a lot of easy misidentifications. Let's say if someone who is really into UAPs is looking up in the sky, I can imagine that there's quite some stuff happening up there that could be identified as a UAP. Nowadays, we know maybe there's some meteors, there's maybe Starlink passing by, etc. And when these reports are coming from credible observers, and I'm also talking about, let's say, military personnel, naval personnel, etc., we haven't heard too much of those stories yet, but these people, they have a lot of experience and sightings as well, I think. It adds weight to the discussion, and it adds weight to the yeah, as I said before, getting rid of the stigma. And that's you can only do that if you have people who know what they're doing, who are not there for the fame or making stuff up. The moment we come forward with our sightings and say, well, I have this and this many thousands of flying hours and I've seen this, I have no clue what it could be, especially coming from these military pilots like Ryan Graves, etc. I think it's a wake-up call that we have to take it more serious.
Yeah, and it means nothing coming from someone like me when I look out the window or I look up in the sky and I see something I can't identify because I have zero skill set and foundation to be able to I make an identification on what it could be. And again, when you have people like yourself and other pilots that have experienced thousands of hours of flying through the sky and looking at and identifying things, and you have a very small amount of things that are unexplainable, that is more than worth paying attention to and investigating.
Then then again, I could be wrong as well. I mean, pilots, military observers, they could be misidentifying stuff as well. So it's not that if I see something that is immediately something extraterrestrial or supernatural, etc., I could be completely misinterpreting things as well. And then again, also for you, you might actually be looking up in the sky and see something that's genuinely unknown. So it doesn't make your sighting or observation any less valuable. But I think, especially in the process of getting rid of the stigma, we need to have people who are down to earth, but intended, down to earth, and approaching the topic as open as possible.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's the main catch why let's say pilots and military aviators are coming forward now.
Yeah. So since you've come forward about your UAP sightings, have you had any surprising or meaningfully impactful interactions that have happened since, conversations that you weren't expecting, people reaching out to you where you're like, holy shit, I never thought this person would reach out. Anything like that that you can talk about?
Yeah, definitely. I've received some private emails and messages from people who are still flying now as pilots or used to be pilots with their own sightings and really touching accounts because some people they're finally for the first time in their lives able to share what they've seen and experienced, which is which is very very touching in a way because it shows that there's but some people even some emotional trauma behind it because they know what they've seen, but they can never talk about it openly. So that was really interesting. Some of my own colleagues, they've come forward with their own sightings. Sometimes after only a couple of flights, because we were flying maybe 3 4 days in a row, and only on the last day, this colleague is opening up about what he's seen because he was so reluctant to talk about it, and only after he realized that I was not going to make fun of him, he basically opened up about it. That was really interesting. I've also received some extremely interesting emails from journalists and authors who are now busy writing their books and also approaching the topic very seriously, and that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
I hardly received any ridicule. At the few people who have been laughing at it or maybe ridiculizing it have been the people who are not aviators who are not working in aviation, and none of my colleagues have ever laughed about it or made a joke about it. And I think that's very surprising, because I was actually ready to take a lot of flack from my colleagues for coming forward with it. Absolutely nothing like it, and a lot of colleagues there. More open-minded than I initially thought. That's very interesting to see as well.
Yeah, and especially for your colleagues who have seen similar things, it's probably a relief that someone else is talking about it, because your mind can go to some dark places if you have an experience and you hold it in and you're not sure if you can talk about it. So having people in the space that are open, I'm sure has provided a release valve for a lot of pilots to come out and share their experiences without the fear of being ridiculed, or if they are ridiculed, it's it's a small amount of people, because the internet is vast, and so the amount of interactions that you're going to have with the good versus the bad, almost always the good outweighs the bad. Not that the harmful interactions don't leave an impact, but there's a lot of people out there who are open to curiosity and open to seeing evidence and finding out the truth behind these sorts of things.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And it's funny because the couple of times that people were making fun of the subject, it was the times when they were asking me, "Oh, so do you believe in UFOs?" And I'm not believing in anything, and I don't even like the term UFO, by the way. And I said, "No, I don't believe in the UFOs. I've just seen something during my career, 20-year career as a pilot, that I cannot explain, and I just want to be able to explain it. And if we can do that by talking about the topic, then by all means. But it's very interesting to see that a lot of people are putting labels on it. If you talk about UAP, you're a believer. Well, I think it's an easy way to close down the subject and not having to think about it.
Yeah, there's a way to have conversations and just talk about what you've seen without making extrapolations on what the source definitely is or not is. You can just talk openly about it, and if you don't know, you don't know, and if someday we find out, then that's great too.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said before, even if we found out that it's a new kind of weather phenomena, or it's like a new military missile, whatever, I highly doubt it. But even if that's the case, then that's fine by me. I mean, I just want to know if it's a safety issue for my flights, and if not, then I'm happy with any explanation.
Yeah. So as we start to end off, I wanted to read an excerpt from an article that Ryan Graves wrote, another pilot, in Politico a few weeks ago. I believe it was published at the end of February. And it's called "We Have a Real UFO Problem, and It's Not Balloons." And this is around the time when the Chinese spy balloon was going around, and that was every other article in the news. And Ryan Graves writes, "Above all, we need to listen to pilots. Military and civilian pilots provide critical firsthand insights into advanced UAP. Right now, the stigma attached to reporting UAP is still too strong. Since I came forward about UAP in 2019, only one other pilot from my squadron has gone public. Commercial pilots also face significant risks to their careers for doing so. New rules are needed to require civilian pilots to report UAP, protect the pilots from retribution, and a process must be established for investigating their reports. Derision or denial over the unknown is unacceptable. This is a time for curiosity. If the phenomena I witnessed with my own eyes turns out to be foreign drones, they pose an urgent threat to national security and airspace safety. If they are something else, it must be a scientific priority to find out." I think that kind of sums up the attitude that you and Ryan Graves and other pilots seem to share, is that I'm seeing this stuff. It's not seeming to go away. It would probably be good to be curious about it and actively create programs and procedures to report these to acquire more information, whatever it is.
I completely agree, and I'm very happy also that Ryan Grace is taking this so serious. That's also why I participated in this podcast. Interestingly enough, I've been approached, and I'm working out together with a company called Enigma Labs, and they are completely independent company, and they are going to set up an app which basically can be available for anyone, but especially focused on pilots, where they can make their reportings. And with all these reports, they're going to basically create a database with sightings, and they try to approach the whole topic as objective as possible, just to gather data. We have to get rid of the stigma. We have to, basically every pilot should or could be equipped with such an app on their iPad or whatever phone, and I think that's one really big step on just gathering data. And the moment we have enough data, together with getting rid of the stigma, because there are a few different processes that go hand in hand, we can approach the topic in a much more sensible way. And like Ryan Graves said, if it happens to be foreign drones, I mean, okay, that's an acute safety issue. But even if it's something else, we have to investigate it. And the only thing that we can do is just open up about it and analyze it, collect data. So yeah, in that sense, I'm happy to see that Ryan Graves is so active with this. Companies like Enigma Labs are starting up, and yeah, well, let's see where the future is going, because since 2020, a lot of things have happened, and it seems to be a topic that's being taken serious, first of all, and that's being uh, yeah, approached openly by a lot of individuals and YouTubers like yourself, for example. And I think that's a wonderful development.
Where's the best place for people to keep up with your work, with the photography, blog posts, UAP reports? Where's the best place for people to follow for that?
I think Instagram would be the best portal. I'm very active on Instagram. JPC Van Heijst. Even if you look me up just phonetically, you'll probably see it as the first suggestion. My website as well. And my website, I post some blogs every now and then, some articles, and a lot of pictures, etc. That's also my my how do you say this? My resume is on there. So if people want to know more about me, yeah, those are the best ways. And for the latest updates, I mostly post on Facebook and Instagram. So I can easily be found there. They have this little blue tick. So even if you misspell my Dutch name, you you can probably find me there.
Yeah, I just want to say I encourage people to go check out the website, and for me personally, the photography. I was making notes over the past couple of days on the podcast and blog posts and going through past interviews to brainstorm topics and questions. And every time I came back to your photography, I get sidetracked for at least 30 minutes just staring at photos. Like not just the UAP photos, but just anything, the horizon, seeing the curvature of the earth, the topography. It's incredible work, and that on its own is worthy of a podcast, just the beauty of your photography. So I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate your time. This has been an absolute blast, and I encourage people to go check out your work as well, because it will not
Uh,
be time wasted.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I put my whole soul in my photography in that sense. I even got a part-time contract for flying now because I want to focus much more on my photography. And actually, photography in combination with the writing, because I realize I'm turning 40 this year. I've been flying for 20 years now. It's so important to create and to share beauty. And especially nowadays in the world, the world is becoming a dark and unpredictable place in many ways. And I try to yeah, to counteract it a little bit by adding some beauty to the world through my camera, through my social media, whatever. And yeah, I appreciate it. It's really nice to hear that that is so enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christian.
Awesome, awesome. Well, yeah. By the way, if people want to get in touch with me, both as I said before, both through Instagram, but also the contact page on my website, it's all confidential. The emails that I receive only end up with me. So also, if other pilots or other people want to share their experiences, more than happy to listen and to hear about it.